At the ritual of summoning demons, Evans finally recalled memories of his past life. This should be an online game released and operated by our own company for 6 years. Now his adoptive father is the latest version of the leader of the villainous organization. And I will reveal my identity in 6 years, jumping back from the hesitant protagonist. In the end, due to the decision to block a fatal blow for the player character, he didn't even have a chance to enter the game and was killed in the cutscene CG by the big brother of Genzheng Miaohei. But in fact, the problem is not significant. Because Evans is also aware of various secret promotion routes exclusive to player characters, as well as the principles of various paths as secret knowledge, he is sure to be able to reverse his unfortunate fate. So now there's only one question left. According to the original plot, shouldn't I have been saved by the protagonist before this breaking ceremony began? Ava's, who was tied to the ceremonial stage as a sacrifice, fell into contemplation. This book, also known as When the Plot Skip Players Enter the Game World, keywords. Victoria Fantasy, Amber Flow. We have completed nearly 10 million word works such as Players Super Justice, Overturn Tower, Mercury Blood, etc., and our reputation is guaranteed. Keywords of the novel. Pastor's Secret Continuation without pop-ups, Pastor's Secret Continuation TXT Complete Collection Download, Pastor's Secret Continuation Latest Chapter Reading. 1. Are you here to arrest me? In Chapter 1 you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Are you here to arrest me? Yes, hello. I made an appointment with Haina Inspector yesterday to investigate the case of Mr. Edwards Moriarty being attacked. A young girl in a blue and white uniform, looking around 20 years old, was standing nervously and at a loss in front of the gate of an estate, holding her big brimmed hat. Her brown curly hair was tied behind her in a ponytail, with a high nose bridge. The lake's blue eyes were full of panic about what had been messed up. Sorry, there is a temporary supervision meeting at the District Supervision Bureau. Yesterday, another warehouse explosion occurred in the White Queen's district, and traces of inflammatory semen were detected at the scene. It is suspected that a demonic scholar was involved. I think it may be the wanted criminal who attacked Mr. Edwards the day before yesterday. So, said Haina, her voice decreasing as she spoke. So you took the initiative to participate in this supervisory meeting that you were not actually required to attend, and were late. 2 hours and 20.3 minutes. The serious and aged voice of the old man echoed across the iron gate. That is a special tone with long notes, a unique elf accent of the Wandu people. He closed the pocket watch with a click, which was adorned with gemstones, and withdrew it to his chest, staring seriously at Haina. Standing across from Haina is an elderly elf wearing a butler's uniform, thin and tall. The wrinkles on his face remind people of tree bark, and his dark green pupils are closer to wolves than lake water. The old elf looked almost 2 meters tall, with a posture of carrying hands on his back like a ghostly figure reflected by a dead wood in the moonlight at night. The straight and motionless back is now filled with strong pressure. Although Haina is actually a trainee supervisor who has not yet graduated, she is still a quasi-formal supervisor who passes the graduation assessment with full marks and can accept the Queen's honors at any time. Now she is wearing a probationary badge, just because the griffin assigned to her is still on the way to blending. In theory, she shouldn't be so afraid of a butler. But the old man in front of me is different. Because this elderly elf butler is his instructor. Although he followed ancient conventions and served the Moriarty family as a butler for a long time since the founding of the country. At the same time, he was also the chief inspector who stepped down 80 years ago. I thought you would be even later, Miss Haina. The old butler, with his hands behind his back, spoke in an elf-like voice that always gave Haina a hint of arrogance, saying, young Master Edwards was attacked by a demonic scholar the day before yesterday and was unconscious until last night. But when he heard that the Supervisory Bureau was coming to ask some questions, he cooperated and voluntarily gave up going to the glass stage sanatorium. He just took some medicine and dragged his weak body to wait for you by the fireplace for 2 hours, and I also waited for you at the door for 2 hours. It's almost dark now, so if you're any later, you might as well be late for tomorrow. Since it's already late for tomorrow, I don't think you're in a hurry for a week of rest. According to the rules of the Supervisory Bureau, a case that has signed an appointment letter will have a result within a week of filing. With Miss Haina's perfect graduation, I believe we can successfully find that demonic scholar. Since the prisoners have already been arrested and brought to justice, why bother my poor young Master Edwards? Why don't you please go back? I will explain it to Mr. Kent. Kent is the director of the White Queen District Inspectorate. Even if Haina becomes a full-time employee, Kent is still 3 levels higher than her. If the old butler's tone was not so sinister, she would immediately run away and leave this troublesome matter to her superiors. But the problem is, she is actually still a senior student now. Although she can be said to be in high school, she hasn't graduated yet. She doesn't have enough social experience to distinguish whether the old man's words are seriously making such a proposal or just satirizing herself. But her intuition told her that if the old man had not intended to do so, she would have simply run away foolishly, afraid that she would really be in trouble. I'm really sorry. So Haina could only bow her head and apologize. I will also apologize to Mr. Edwards. Anyway, I had already made an appointment for the meeting in advance, but I was late for so long without saying it in advance. I was indeed at fault. She looked at the iron gate that blocked her from the old man, and her thoughts began to drift subconsciously again. On the black hollow iron door, only low-key thorny patterns adorn it. It doesn't look like a prestigious family. In fact, Professor Moriarty, the adoptive father of the person involved in this incident, Edwards Moriarty, can indeed be called a low-key, calm, intelligent, and knowledgeable person. Professor Moriarty was also a teacher at Haina University, responsible for subjects such as astrology, astronomy, and advanced mathematics. Inheriting the Moriarty Chamber of Commerce, he owns 3 museums under his name, and even the only planetarium in White Queens was built with his funding. Despite being so wealthy, I am just quietly studying in college. He even sponsored many orphanages and adopted many orphans, making him a remarkable and kind-hearted figure. When she arrived, the captain specifically reminded her that the Moriarty family was not only wealthy, but also a founding family served by elves. Although Mr. James, the head of the family, has a gentle personality, he still needs to be more careful. According to the rules, any direct participant involved in a demonic event must wear a disciplinary lock and be escorted to the local supervisory bureau for spiritual examination by the sheriff as soon as they are out of danger to their lives. Only after confirming innocence will they be sent back to the hospital or nursing home. This is because in demon rituals, the identities of the ceremony host, participants, ceremony mentor, and offerings cannot be simply distinguished by the victim identity of injured or not. Since the sacrifice can survive, it indicates that the ceremony has largely failed. Although the offered sacrifice may not necessarily die, it is usually killed in order to silence. Therefore, when the injured person appears instead of the deceased, the injured person may not necessarily be a sacrifice, but there is also a considerable possibility that they are related to the ceremony. But this rule has now become ineffective. Director Kent acted like a blind man, completely ignoring this accessible clue. It was the old butler who took the initiative to contact Director Kent and made an appointment for today's meeting that he suddenly remembered this matter. And when she came, the Supervisory Bureau didn't even provide her with an accompanying legal mage, only allowing her to come alone as a trainee supervisor without a griffin, armor, or sword. Such obvious shielding. Haina felt that even if this matter was really related to Evans, she probably wouldn't be able to take him away. But also because of such a big battle, she felt. Maybe this matter is really related to the other party. That's really good. Clearly just an adopted civilian orphan. Just because of luck, he was valued and adopted by the professor. Now he has become a big shot that the Supervisory Bureau cannot move. Haina, standing at the door, was stunned and lost in thought, with a hint of sourness. But just then, the iron door suddenly slowly opened. She looked up in shock and saw the old man's still expressionless face, yet inexplicably feeling as if he wasn't as angry anymore. The old elf silently glanced at her, then slowly walked back with his hands behind his back. Haina was stunned for a while before realizing that she was trying to keep up. So she hurriedly put on the hat she was holding in her arms and quickly followed up. But just after taking a few steps, I realized that I had to turn back and close the door. But just as she turned around, she saw that the door of the estate had closed by herself. Not only that, there were even bright runes shining from the inside of the ordinary iron door. The sunlight is skewed and the evening breeze has stopped slightly. Haina vaguely felt as if something intangible was enveloping the area, changing the atmosphere of the estate. I didn't mean to trouble you either, Miss Haina. Although the old elf was walking ahead of him, the old man's much gentler voice rang out in his ear with precision. But when you make an agreement with someone, you must abide by it. You can meet at any time you agree, without the need for advance or delay. Yes, the consequences of violating the rules in school may not be as serious, but there are also no griffin knights patrolling the streets, no lawyers with armed knights regularly reviewing the tax accounts of various companies. There is no monitoring system like you that can directly arrest suspicious individuals. Everyone in this country values rules. The Supervisory Bureau, Legal Court, and Arbitration Hall guard not only the will of Her Majesty the Queen, but also many rules established by the Parliament. I will forgive you this time, and I won't tell Mr. Kent about your mistake. I will say that you arrived on time, but after learning about it, you stayed for 2 cups of tea and some dim sum. But this is because young Master Edwards is kind-hearted. When you were an hour late, I had already decided to call the Supervisory Bureau. It was young Master Edwards who stopped me. He said, we always have to give people a chance. No matter what reason we're looking for, we have to meet first. The old elf spoke slowly and walked for a long time before reaching the entrance of the estate. At the next moment, his voice lowered slightly, but still sounded clearly in Haina's ear. Although Avalon does not have the so-called nobles of other countries, the descendants of the founders are equally noble. Without the sacrifice of those 20 founders, everyone would die. Even the Queen must respect the descendants of the founders. I feel your sincere apologies, so I have forgiven you for exceeding your agreement. But why don't you think carefully about whether you offended someone or blocked someone's path? As I said, this is a supervisory meeting that doesn't require your participation. Upon hearing this, Haina suddenly froze. At this moment, the old man who walked to the door elegantly turned around and bowed slightly to Haina. Please follow me, Miss Haina. The young master has been waiting for a long time. At this moment, he put on the butler's mask to welcome the guests. My previous attitude was more like facing an instructor who was not up to par with students. And Haina, whose brain was in chaos, followed the old elf towards the living room. The touch of the soft carpet under her feet startled her, and she looked up to ask if she needed to take off her shoes. But the calm and composed attitude of the old elf left her unsure. So I could only follow behind with a nervous heart, feeling the sudden warmth of the winter stove. At this moment, she realized that she had let an old man wait at the door for 2 hours on a winter evening. With guilt and shame, she didn't know how to open her mouth. Even the suspicion of Edwards was diluted in this confession. So, she met the somewhat promiscuous and unrestrained Edgar Moriarty. He is currently sitting in a wheelchair, with a blanket covering his lap. His pale and weak face was devoid of blood, and he looked only 17 or 18 years old with a handsome appearance completely different from Professor Moriarty's. He was wearing a pure white fluffy pajama, looking as if he had just taken a shower. The soft white golden hair reflects the warm light of the fire. He was quietly and attentively reading a book in front of the fire, with a delicate expression that had a gentle intention. It reminded her of a poet and the rising fire in the fireplace at home. That beautiful scene looks like a painting. Haina instinctively widened her eyes. But at that moment, the boy heard something and skillfully turned around, pushing the wheelchair. At this moment, Haina noticed that he was sitting in a wheelchair under him. Is this the price of being attacked by demonic scholars? I don't know when she instinctively abandoned the possibility that the demonic scholar is Evans. The boy looked over, his deep blue pupils like the sea. Ms. Haina. That is a clear voice that gives people a sense of nobility, a gorgeous voice line that matches their appearance. Compared to his weak face, his voice was more energetic and polite. Hello, first time meeting. Excuse me, are you here to arrest me? End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Misleading. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Misleading, not a lady. Haina whispered, I haven't actually graduated yet. And, this is just a question, but before she could say this, she was softly interrupted by Evans. Before officially graduating, you can enter the supervisory bureau. I understand, is Miss Haina studying at Wanli Law University? Edwards has a standard and clean accent, and does not have the elven accent that royal people are proud of, symbolizing a sense of nobility. But this actually made Haina, who came to study abroad from a small place, more favorable. So she nodded and responded, yes. She spoke with great pride as she straightened her chest and said, I am the former president of the student union and also the chief female student in 4th grade. As an outstanding graduate, I obtained an employment permit from the Supervision Bureau 1 year in advance. Although my sword has not yet been issued, my name is already on the Supervision Bureau's end. So, you can still be considered my senior sister. Evans crossed his fingers and rested them on his knees. His upper body relaxed and leaned back, speaking slowly, actually, I am also a student at Wanli Law University. This year's freshman. Really? Haina was a bit surprised and said, but I haven't seen you before. Because of my poor health, I fell seriously ill before enrolling in school. As a result, I was bedridden at home and rested for 3 months. Evans's somewhat pale expression filled his words with persuasiveness. It's not an easy child, I understand. You are indeed innocent. I will report to the director when I return. Haina nodded repeatedly, feeling pity in her heart. The previous shallow jealousy towards Evans dissipated as a result. She felt ashamed of herself for this. As a supervisor of the Supervisory Bureau, she can also be considered half a knight. Surprisingly, I have forgotten the teachings of humility and compassion taught by my mentor. The heart of jealousy is truly ugly. So, Senior, Evans suddenly spoke, have you seen what's in the fireplace? Something burning. Haina turned around and said with uncertainty, I can't quite tell. It doesn't seem like firewood. That's a diary. Edward said gently, maybe it's evidence of my connection with the demonic scholar. Just like the book in my hand. He said, closing the book in his hand and throwing it into the fire together. Upon hearing this, Haina was suddenly taken aback. She instinctively took a step forward and instinctively reached out to grab it. Without any warning, she was the first to intercept the book in the air. She frowned tightly and looked down. But I found out that the book was called 80 Selections of Poetry from Shaidaer. Haina certainly knows this book. Because this is the textbook that will be used in the first year's elf language course. She flipped through it with unease, confirming that it was not any evidence linked to demonic scholars at all. Even inside, different colored pens were used to mark many key and difficult points. Just a joke. I am a victim of the incident, senior sister. This is clearly what you just said. Why did you become suspicious when I just casually mentioned it? Are you so lacking in confidence in me, said Evans with a slight smile on his lips. Haina suddenly realized that this seemingly gentle and refined young man seemed to have some hidden malicious intentions. This is a very serious matter, I can't joke. She stiffened her face and taught a lesson as seriously as in school, saying, demon scholars often make sacrifices based on living people, and they even kill the offerings after the sacrifice to silence them. That is absolute evil. Even if they have no grudges or grudges against others, they will still kill them as materials, which is outrageous. How can this be a joke? As she spoke, something suddenly came to her mind and her gaze became sharp. Speaking of it, how did you survive if it were a sacrifice? They offered me as a sacrifice to summon a powerful demon, but they didn't expect the demon to be closer to me. So I ordered the demon to kill them all. The young man smiled and said increasingly outrageous words. In fact, the Moriarty family is actually full of evil. My father, Professor James Moriarty, is a demonic scholar with a dream of destroying the world. And I am not his adopted son, but a demon summoned by him from another world. I can completely destroy the Avalon Kingdom within a year. Haina was stunned to hear more than half of it before realizing that Evans was just talking nonsense. What are you talking nonsense about? She shouted in anger and embarrassment, at least half of which was because she was ashamed that she had taken Evans's strange words seriously for a moment. This young man looks gentle and beautiful like a poet, but he is cunning like a fox, full of lies from heaven and earth. She became angry, but dared not speak loudly in front of the old butler. As a result, she blushed and said, honestly explain. Why did you appear in the demon ceremony? Someone anonymously reported that you went to the Stone Arch Park yourself and were not coerced. I'm telling the truth. If you don't believe me, take me to the Supervision Bureau. Edward shrugged, as if feeling regret from the bottom of his heart. But Haina knew it was simply impossible. Without evidence, she could not have arrested Edwards in a situation where the Supervisory Bureau clearly had a tendency to cover up. If I really take away Evans who is still in a wheelchair, I'm afraid I'll be the unlucky one. Subsequently, Evans slowly suppressed his fox-like smile. He showed a serious expression and said seriously, that's what I said. But since you know, senior sister, what I'm saying is all nonsense, why can you trust an anonymous report letter? What's the difference between what I'm saying and that report letter? So, what is the fact? I can give you another version of the story. When I was out for a walk, I was attacked and taken to the Stone Arch Bridge Park. When I woke up, I sat in a wheelchair. I had no idea what happened in between, let alone how I was sacrificed to evil demons, how they were beaten away, or how I survived. But this version of the story is too smooth and flawless. It's like a lawyer defending in court. If I say it directly, you may become even more suspicious. Evans sighed, as if he appeared helpless and innocent again. He said, so, which one do you believe in? If we exclude the emotional aspect and judge from a rational perspective. It seems that the latter is more reasonable. Haina immediately realized that she had misunderstood Evans again. Because Evans is too weak. Haina could sense that he was probably a superhero, but her reaction was weak. At most, it only lit up one layer of the road. Even if a demon is truly summoned, at best it is the intensity of the demon's use, and it cannot cause such a large-scale destruction. Besides, the confirmed deceased at the ceremony is indeed a wanted criminal who fled to the capital. That person once sacrificed to a small village, and now he is a third-level demon scholar who can even summon higher-level demons. Was it because after summoning the demon, the contract failed and was backfired by the demon? It's not impossible. In that case, as the summoner dies, the demon will be deported. Evans was only severely injured by the ritual and then picked up by the old butler. Logically speaking, this possibility is much greater. But why did Evans tell himself such outrageous lies? Soon, Haina reacted, she gave a very reasonable explanation. Because her attitude transformation was too simple. She declared Evans innocent without careful questioning. As a truly innocent person, Evans felt angry for his hasty attitude and deliberately said some strange things, mocking himself for being easily preconceived and trusting others. I see. That's why the director didn't pay much attention to this matter. Because he knew that Edwards couldn't be a criminal, and he mostly didn't know any important information, and the investigation was just in vain. So all of this is right. Yesterday, another case occurred. In order to perform large-scale rituals such as summoning demons, demonic scholars usually need to work in pairs. Moreover, in most cases, paired demonic scholars have a master-disciple relationship. If the demonic scholar who served as the mentor was summoned to engage in a demonic backlash, then it would be reasonable for the apprentice to act alone after escaping. If Evans is his assistant and apprentice, then who committed yesterday's case? If Evans controls the demon to kill one person, will he let the other person go? Hi, what kind of nonsense am I talking about? Superior demons are not so easily controlled by such beginners. I'm sorry, I was preconceived. Haina thought of this and simply apologized. I am equally sorry for the previous delay. If you still plan to come back to school, I can ask my descendants to do you some convenience. This is not compensation, it's just an apology. If there's anything else I can do, please feel free to mention it. Is anything okay? Evans seemed to be a bit tempted. I declare in advance that I have no money. Haina's face showed a hint of sadness as she helplessly added, besides monetary compensation. If necessary, I can do some volunteer work. It's okay, just resolve the misunderstanding. Edward smiled gently and said, I actually feel uneasy. After all, if someone raises doubts about my senior sister after she goes back, and she comes back to investigate, it will be very troublesome for both of us. Not to mention, if she is late again. Now let's guess, senior sister. Why do I know about demons? Although I haven't been exposed to anything and was unconscious throughout the process, why can I guess at the moment of meeting that this matter is related to demonic scholars? I think this is the legendary deductive method. Just like the famous Mr. Sherlock. Haina's eyes lit up and she said, I remember Mr. Sherlock, who used to be the professor's favorite student. He seemed to be good at using this divination-like method to understand the details of others. I have collected clippings for all the cases he solved. I cut out the parts of those newspapers that mention Mr. Sherlock and pasted them into a separate book. Now this book is already 1/3 full. The more she spoke, the smoother her logic felt. Feeling like she had met a like-minded person, she suddenly felt enlightened and many doubts were immediately resolved. The brain seemed to become clear in an instant. Watching Haina get excited and talk non-stop. Evans, sitting in the wheelchair, squinted his eyes slightly and showed a harmless smile. If Haina had not been so careless and could have observed carefully, she would have noticed the old elf guarding quietly beside her, and the shadow beneath him remained motionless. The shadow cast by the wheelchair under Edwards was trembling slightly, like a beast breathing steadily in sleep. This was all your own reasoning, I didn't tell many lies. Reasoning this kind of thing, first determining the conclusion and then finding evidence will definitely be biased. It seems that you are not qualified yet. Yes, Evans is indeed a sacrifice. But at the same time, Evans was indeed a participant in the demon ritual. What he said before was not a lie. If he hadn't suddenly recalled memories of his past life, he could have been a demon from another world summoned during the ritual, sacrificing the soul of Awas. Because along with those memories of his past life appeared the incredibly familiar light curtain in front of him. Evans, human male, comprehensive level 4 basic occupation, Reverend LV1. Basic prayer. Level 1, 93%, demonologist LV3. Demonology. Level 1, 13%, basic ritual. Level 1, 5%, devil contract. Level 1, 99%, illuminated path. Dedication. Level 0, beyond. First floor mana pool. 1/1, light, 3/3, dark, free experience. 24 road characteristics, beyond. Shadow affinity LV1. You sign a life contract with the shadow demon and can freely use the first level shadow abilities. End of this chapter. 3, Chapter 3. Evans Moriarty. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Chapter 3 Edwards Moriarty. Now, the shadow demon summoned from the ceremony is in the shadow at the feet of Ava's. He sat in a wheelchair, not unable to move because his legs were sacrificed. But if he steps on his own shadow, he will immediately wake up the shadow demon and transform it into reality. This wheelchair was what Evans asked the old butler for after waking up. Because now, his shadow affinity level is too low. Shadow demons belong to upper-level demons, and shadow affinity requires at least reaching level 3 to control them, and reaching level 5 to merge with them. Before that, he could only draw a portion of the power of the shadow demon to use his powers. Although the shadow devil will not harm himself, and even protect Evans based on a contract, he is completely unable to restrain the shadow devil's behavior. From this perspective, a demonic scholar who contracts low-level demons is like walking a dog, and Evans belongs to the category of dogs walking people. How to seal the shadow demon is not something that Evans should know, but rather memories from another world. Edwards Moriarty, Dao 2, Demon Scholar, Avalon Kingdom. This is the world in an MMORPG game called Ring of the Tail. This game is released and operated by their company, the God of No Appearance Studio. They say it's their company, but in fact, the output of this game has nothing to do with Evans because he is not a staff member in the research and development department. He is a newly arrived human resources manager, commonly known as HR. 3 years ago, Edwards resigned and became unemployed. Because I was stuck in a non-compete agreement and couldn't find a job with my peers. I was dragged into a trap by my best brother. That brother is the game copywriter of this company, flipping around in his ear every day, talking about many of the Easter eggs he designed. In the end, Evans couldn't bear the disturbance, and at the same time, he just caught up with the game shortage and played it for a while, feeling that it was indeed a good game. The downside is that it's quite liver-saving. But it's a good way to pass the time when you're unemployed and at home. Later on, I heard that the God of No Appearance Studio was recruiting HR, and it happened that Evans had also passed the restriction period, so he directly submitted his resume for an interview. As a result, he was still handing over his work and was sent to this world by a mud truck just because he crossed the road and received messages on his way to work. If he had known he would travel into this world, he would have asked more about the company's internal information or read more storyline discussion posts on forums. This is the biggest mistake. Because fundamentally, Evans is a viral player who doesn't watch the plot much and doesn't care much about the characters. Although I learned a lot of secret settings, character backgrounds, and future main storylines that ordinary players don't know when chatting with friends, I also shared some early storylines from the group. But he never cared about the main storyline, instead, the sidelines of various characters were much more interesting. Edwards entered the pit from the 3.0 era and just after passing his first group book boss, he ate the main storybook and completed all the old main storylines up to the beginning of 3.0 with just one click. Not only that, he also skipped all the plot animations on his upgrade journey and at the beginning of the dungeon. I really can't skip it, but I've finished watching the fast forward with left click and left click. As a result, Evans now has no idea what the early main storyline was. On the contrary, the later plot left a deep impression on him because the main storyline performance of the team was quite good. Even if you haven't carefully read the previous plot, you can still guess a rough idea through the performance of the team's main storyline that cannot be skipped. At the beginning of the main storyline, Evans appears. He was kidnapped and held a ceremony at the altar during the winter of 1898 in the Tianping calendar. The passing players accidentally broke through the barrier that drove away passers-by and saw the cruel sacrificial scene. In an emergency, he pretended to have reported to the Supervisory Bureau and was leading the way for the Griffin Knights, scaring away those two people. Evans was rescued from the ritual altar by the player, and then welcomed homeless players who had stolen wallets and identification documents to his home to eat, drink, and rest. Afterwards, Evans will enroll and grow together with the players, and continue to investigate this case together. It turned out that this case was getting bigger and bigger, even involving high-level officials in the kingdom, and because Evans was in fatal danger, his sister Yulia suddenly lost control. Catalyzed by blood crystals, she became the Phantom Flame Butterfly, the first 8-person Ben boss. That is also the first illusion that players see in the game. Her body curled up in a ball, wrapped in an amber-like transparent butterfly chest and abdomen, protected by butterfly wings made of inflammatory essence. Due to the low level of the dungeon, this 8-player dungeon is the easiest to rank in the daily random dungeon, with an average of 3 or 4 Yulia battles per week. Because Yulia doesn't want to harm Ava's, it's an entry-level boss with no mechanism or desire to attack. It's a classic game where players can hit and dodge whatever they want. Even if the level is high enough, you can barely pass the level without relying on the mechanism and playing the main body throughout the entire process. If you eat the main storybook after defeating Yulia, you will receive some appearance rewards. In the end, she was killed, lost most of her spirituality, and shrunk into a flame butterfly, contracted by Evans to become his first demon. Edwards used this method to preserve her spirituality, hoping to find the legendary master of resurrection, Worm Pearl, to resurrect her in the future. Throughout the main storyline of version 5.0, Evans mastered new abilities. It was only through his ability to seal theoretically indestructible illusions into cards and equip his own demons with enhanced equipment that Evans finally gained his own great enhancement. Then he stopped playing with the players and instead became the storyline killer in CG, ending the illusion-type boss. Brother. Just as Evans thought of this, he suddenly heard a childish voice ring. He was suddenly startled. Haina, who was excitedly chatting with Evans about Sherlock and Reason, heard the voice and instinctively turned her head. I saw a little girl standing silently at the door. When you woke up yesterday, I happened to be sleeping. After I woke up, you went back to sleep. She, who had just woken up in the evening, said with some grievances and some astonishment, Brother, why are you sitting in a wheelchair? And who is she? She was wearing the same pure white plush nightgown as Evans, with silver hair and shoulders, and deep red pupils reminiscent of roses. Her facial features are delicate, reminiscent of white cats or rabbits. It is a type completely different from the dazzling and handsome feeling of Edwards. Whether it is the eyebrows, eyes, hair color, or pupil color, it is enough to prove that the two have no blood relationship. When it comes to the similarity between the two, it's the kind of inherited weakness. She has a similar feeling of weakness to Evans, and it is more pronounced than Evans. The girl's skin is somewhat pathological, almost transparent and fair. When she stands at the door, she unconsciously supports one side of the door frame, tilting her body slightly to shift her center of gravity and reduce the pressure of standing straight. What a lovely girl! Haina's eyes lit up. It's like seeing a cute pet, she wants to get close to it, but she's worried that she might scare the other person. It's okay, Yuli. It's just temporary. This is Sister Haina, there's something I need to ask. Evans smiled and called the girl's nickname as he remembered it. But for some reason, I always feel that this title is a bit awkward. It's like not calling your friends by their names for a long time, but using their nicknames instead. One day when suddenly calling out the other person's full name, it always feels like it's not their name. After a moment of confusion, he opened his arms slightly towards Yulia and said, "Come and hug." Yulia walked over obediently and leisurely. Just like waking up, there is a sense of powerlessness that can make people worry about falling. As he hugged Yulia, who was leaning against him, Evans suddenly lost consciousness for a moment. At this moment, he was holding Yulia, but it seemed like another Ava's. As the memory of the Ava's of this world, after receiving the prophecy of the future, he suddenly felt some kind of fear. Yulia will turn into a monster. And then, she will die. At this moment, Edward's memory overlaps with reality. Completely integrated together, the memories of a dual life become clear. It's like a person who suddenly wakes up from a nightmare and finally distinguishes whether they are in the dream or not. After awakening his past life memories for 2 full days, he finally realized that he was not dreaming. But it's really time traveling. I came to this world at a very young age, and it wasn't until a day ago that I just remembered who I was. However, he also realized another thing clearly. That the plot has changed now. In the game, there is absolutely no contracted shadow demon. Because this ceremony was interrupted by the player, it was not successful at all. And this may mean that there are no player characters in this world. In an epic fantasy game, players usually play the role of a one-time savior. If this game is an online game, then players are usually the saviors of continuity, high frequency, and low fault tolerance. Every major version has to save the world once. Then he will be in trouble. Because the player is a descendant of the Snake Father, who once controlled the path of transcendence and was considered one of the 9 pillar gods. That's why players can have experience points and levels, and can continuously become stronger without any threshold or talent. In terms of setting, the player did not actually rank or team up, but instead defeated all enemies alone. Although he is also an important character, the catastrophic disasters of Fallen Division, Disaster Demon Dragon, and Avalon Shadow cannot be defeated by the conventional strong. Edwards knew that the Avalon Kingdom would have an accident in about 6 months. Although he doesn't remember the main storyline clearly, at least he still remembers the key nodes of version replacement. What he said to Haina was not a lie. The Avalon Kingdom will indeed suffer a catastrophic disaster in half a year, and it is closely related to the demonic ritual events they are currently experiencing that no major figure cares about. But now, Evans still has a chance to change all of this. Change everything. He instinctively hugged Yulia tightly, and the girl keenly sensed something. "Brother. It's nothing." Edward smiled calmly and said, "Yes, I had a long dream yesterday. That Yulia had left me." However, at this moment, he suddenly felt a noticeable tightness in Yulia's body in his arms. Evans's heart twitched slightly. Yulia suddenly spoke up as if trying to cover up, "How long will my brother's wheelchair last?" "Probably. It will take a year, right?" "Is that what the doctor said?" said Edwards, looking at the old butler beside him. "Yes, young Master Edwards." The old butler asked without hesitation, "So, should we take a 1-year leave of absence?" "Anyway, we have already taken a 3-month leave of absence." This is a lie. And both sides are. There were no doctors who allowed Evans to use a wheelchair, as Evans had requested it himself. Those demonic scholars who have contracted with shadow demons will use this method to seal them when they are still unable to control them. In addition to using a wheelchair when moving, it is also important to avoid vigorous movements and slow down one's movements to lower heart rate. This is a common way to suppress demons. In addition, you can also take some heart rate suppressing drugs to make the demon sealed inside the body fall asleep. "No need," said Edwards, "I'll go back to school once this incident is resolved." "Is this incident resolved?" Haina realized something later on. She instinctively realized that at that moment, Edwards's attitude seemed to have changed. That feeling is quite familiar to her. Haina, who was still immature in her freshman year, thought she was still a genius in that remote town. As a result, in the final exam that year, I passed the astrology exam and was able to break out in a cold sweat. But it was precisely because of this that she became serious and realized that she was far from being as excellent as she had imagined in the highest education institution in the Red Queen's district of the capital, Glass Island. At least, she is not a pure genius, but a hardworking genius. With the same attitude of learning casually as before, there is a possibility of failing without being absent. Now she can graduate with the 7-petal flower seal representing full marks, which is precisely because Professor Moriarty's bright red 3-petal flower seal representing pass woke her up. For ordinary students, this is the mark of being released after serving their sentence, which is worth celebrating and celebrating, but for the proud Haina, it was like a slap, hitting her face with a fiery sensation that made her silent and her brain blank. At this moment, Evans gave her this feeling. When seeing the transcript, it feels like waking up from a dream. Yes, I want to participate in the investigation. Edward suddenly became serious and said, since they will kidnap me once, there will be a second time. Without eliminating that group of cultists, I cannot leave the house with peace of mind. Similarly, I cannot wait peacefully at home for an investigation result that I may not be able to accept. So I will also participate in the investigation. Upon hearing these words, Haina felt a bit embarrassed. This undoubtedly implies the extremely slow investigation efficiency of the Supervisory Bureau. The Supervisory Bureau, which places great emphasis on rules, must report everything to its superiors and follow standard procedures in everything. This is the rule of the knights in the Senate. Because they can hardly find anything and even require the assistance of detectives. The Sherlock mentioned by Haina earlier is a detective who has recently become quite famous in the newspaper. Sherlock graduated from King's Law University for many years, but did not choose to enter the inspectorate, the Court of Justice, or the Court of Arbitration. As a result, he is now a special advisor to the Supervisory Bureau, investigating without being bound by various regulations of the Supervisory Bureau, and has successfully solved several major cases. His status is actually much higher than that of his former classmate who entered the Supervisory Bureau after graduation. If Miss Haina can't make up her mind, why not report my words to your boss and ask for his opinion? Evans crossed his hands and said calmly, anyway, according to the rules, you also have to submit all the content of this conversation to your superiors, right? For some reason, at this moment, Ivas reminded Haina of the interviewer at the Supervisory Bureau. Dear readers, I miss you all so much. Feng Gong's voice line, today I will directly add 10,000 words, and tomorrow noon I have another 10,000 words. The recommended slots for the new book period at the starting point are distributed by artificial intelligence, so reading data is really important for new books. Remember not to fatten up, everyone. Come and take a look every day. Don't keep the cat dead. Shocking, the cat is back. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. The Gazing of the Silver Crown Dragon. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. The Gaze of the Silver Crown Dragon. Shortly after Haina left, James Moriarty returned home carrying a heavy suitcase. Is the person from the Supervisory Bureau leaving now? As soon as old James entered the door, he asked. He obviously met Haina at the entrance of the estate and exchanged pleasantries for a while. James is a polite-looking old gentleman with obvious wrinkles on his face. The gray pupils are somewhat cloudy, the eye sockets are deep, and the hair is grayish and sparse. His skin is well maintained. Thin cheeks and high cheekbones. Although he looks very thin when wearing a coat, he can immediately feel that he is not thin when he takes off the coat. He always speaks in a gentle voice, with a long, soft and tongue-curling elf-like voice. At first glance, it is evident that he has a pretty good tutor and his temper is definitely not bad. He put down his suitcase at the door and took off his double-breasted long windbreaker and top hat, handing it over to the valet who was waiting at the door. Their people won't question Evans for a few hours. Thank you, Wade. Remember to bring this box to Evans' room later, he said. Yes, sir. I've taken note of it, his personal servant whispered as he retreated with something. Miss Haina is late. The old elf did not choose to conceal the situation for her, but expressed her dissatisfaction bluntly. She always does this, thinking about her top hat and falling off her tie, recklessly. If she continues like this, she will sooner or later miss something big and be scolded severely by her boss. Sooner or later, let's wait until sooner or later happens before we talk. If she makes a mistake due to her bad habits, let her mistakes teach her a lesson. The old man just smiled and squinted his eyes, saying gently, don't scold her for the mistakes she may make in the future, Oswald. You are just her instructor, not her boss. He was quite friendly and approachable to his elf butler named Oswald. This is also normal, because more than 60 years ago, when he was about the same age as the current Evans, he was also watched by Oswald as he grew up. In addition to the old butler, this house also employs 16 other household servants, including one female butler, 2 close maids, 2 close maids, 2 maids, 5 maids, 1 cook, 2 kitchen assistants, and 1 coachman. The older brother of Evans usually doesn't go home, and besides him and Yulia, the only owners in the family are the old man. James usually acts quietly and calmly, even being polite to his servants. Although he rarely smiles, he never gets angry with others. Or more precisely, no one has ever seen him get angry in the past few decades. Even in the face of rude guests, the old man always maintains his demeanor without hesitation. Yes, old man. Although James is nominally the foster father of Edwards, in reality, he is old enough to be his grandfather. This is also very reasonable. When he adopted Evans, he was only 6 years old. And now Evans is 18 years old. Edward Moriarty, the older brother of Edwards and Julia, was adopted by James at the age of 8. He is now 35 years old. Dad. Yulia, standing next to Evans, greeted her and said hello softly. She was like a well-behaved cat, leaning her head forward and being affectionately touched by the old man. How's your health today, Yulia? He asked seriously, did you take your medicine properly? I have already eaten it. Yulia whispered, her voice giving off a dreamlike transparency. Rest early and don't read too late. Knowledge can never be learned completely. The old man cautioned carefully, you can't go to bed after 9 at night. You're not doing well. Did you hear that, Yulia? As he spoke, Yulia's gaze began to drift to the side, so he spoke a little louder and emphasized, Yulia. Well, I know. Yulia responded vaguely. The old man sighed helplessly and emphasized again, don't stay up late, you silly girl. You don't go out again. There's no difference between day and night for you. It's better to go to bed early and read any books during the day. It's also good for your eyes. As he spoke, Yulia remained silent again. Old James had no choice but to emphasize, I'm old now and can't stay up late. I have to go to bed at 10 p.m., and I can't answer any questions you have. But if you're reading during the day, you can come to me anytime if you don't understand. I won't have my class tomorrow, so I'll stay at home for several days this time. If you have anything you don't understand, you can come and ask me, okay? Okay. Yulia pretended not to hear any more this time. She lifted her head seriously and looked at the old man with ruby-like eyes, saying, I've been reading books on alchemy lately. From the Discourse on the Path of Balance. Does Dad understand this? Dad understands all the books at home. The old man said calmly, on the 9 great roads, Dad knows a little bit. His tone was plain, but there was a feeling of confidence that arose naturally. I will definitely go to bed early today. The girl stretched out 2 fingers in her ear, pointing to the sky, and said seriously, I swear, you keep your word. Don't. The old man only extended his hand, gently bending the girl's fingers and retracting his fist. Don't do this. James said seriously, this is a simple oath, a spiritual gesture. If you violate the oath, you will really be punished. I just want to give it a try. Yulia whispered, what I just saw from a book today. Was my gesture correct? Correct. So don't do it again next time. The old man let out a tired sigh and said, go eat now. I have something to tell Edwards. Yulia responded and followed Oswald to the restaurant. There are only 2 people left in the living room. James regained his silence and sat across from Evans. The old man picked up the cup of tea that Haina had not touched, poured it out, and then added a cup of hot tea for himself. Looking at Ava's, who remained silent, he clenched his teacup and asked softly, "How do you feel about its current state? Is it still stable?" What he said was exactly the shadow devil that Evans had contracted. This kind of thing cannot be concealed from my adoptive father. Since Evans woke up lying at home, it probably means that Steward Oswald brought him back in a coma. James must have checked his body and applied a simple universal seal. At least not allowing the shadow devil to take over Evans's body when he was unconscious. It can be said that it is very considerate. In the picture of the future, the crazy, gloomy, hunched James Moriarty and the kind old man in front of him who cares about him seem to be completely different. In his memory, all he remembers are scenes of James loving him. When Evans was in his early teens, he once unintentionally said that he had some nostalgia for the special fried cod fillet that Aunt Missu would make for them during holidays in the orphanage. The next day, Aunt Missu was hired by a high salary to work as a kitchen assistant at home for a while. Not only did she teach the specially made cod fillet, but she also taught her other common dishes to the kitchen staff at home. When I asked her to leave later, I also gave her an additional reward. At that time, Evans was so scared that he didn't dare to say he wanted to eat or anything for at least half a year. I'm afraid that as soon as I finish speaking with my front foot, I'll buy my back foot immediately. Even for young Evans, who has not yet recalled his past life memories, his understanding of himself has always been clear. He is not James Moriarty's biological son after all. He doesn't deserve to enjoy this kind of preferential treatment for granted. That is to say, Evans himself is more sensible, so he did not become any playboy under such indulgence. So now when Evans looks at his foster father, he always feels his emotions are complicated. He still has a sense of luck. Is there a possibility that at the beginning of the plot, the adoptive father is not yet the mastermind behind the scenes? Or rather, it was during the disintegration of the Avalon Kingdom that he fell into the underworld. This is not impossible either. In the original plot, while the Avalon Kingdom was falling apart, Evans followed the protagonist and fled to the Church Kingdom. Since then, he has been separated from his adoptive father. When we met again, it was already 3 years later. Maybe what happened within these 3 years. However, that would not explain the fact that Evans, as a spy, infiltrated the players. Evans. Watching Ava's fall into contemplation again, the old man softly called out again, "If not, I'll go find the bishop to help you dispel the possessed demon." "Ah, I have no problem, father. In the demon knowledge I obtained from their group, there happened to be a means to seal the shadow demon." Edwards looked up and said with a comforting smile, "I was just thinking about something else." "Then I believe you." My adoptive father nodded slowly and said, "I have brought back the materials you asked me for yesterday. It's easy to find the ropes on the gallows. The nails on the heads of the victims of the car cracking crime are really hard to find. After the Queen ascended to the throne, the car cracking crime has been abolished, and I found them in the museum. I don't know if you want to continue or not, but I have brought back all 4 existing ones. The library records have also been processed very cleanly, so there's no need to worry about anything. Just tell me what else you need. Don't trust outsiders easily anymore." "Did you find it so quickly?" Evans couldn't believe it. He didn't expect that in just one day, his adoptive father would actually bring them over. Is this the power that the Moriarty family could exert during the existence of the Avalon Kingdom? Great. With them, I can more stably seal shadow demons. Edwards warmed his heart and said with heartfelt gratitude, "Thank you, Dad." The 2 ritual materials he requested were not actually used to seal the shadow demon. Because sitting in a wheelchair is the simplest and most stable sealing method, this is the optimal solution tested by demonic scholars in the Star Antimony Kingdom 4 years later. "Then I won't have dinner today." He felt a bit itchy in his heart and looked a bit impatient. Edwards was originally such a fanatic of mysticism, and his actions now have no sense of discord. "I'll do it." Watching as Edwards was about to push his wheelchair away, old James quickly took 2 steps forward, grabbed the back of the wheelchair, and pushed Edwards to his room. On the way, the old man whispered, "Evans, although you may not be happy with what I say, Dad still has to say something. At the ceremony, it is important not to use humans or human remains as materials or offerings. Besides, whatever materials you need, Dad will find a way to find them for you. Can you promise, Dad?" Upon hearing these words, Evans, sitting in a wheelchair, widened his eyes slightly in surprise. "It's not because I was surprised that my adoptive father, who is the mastermind behind the scenes, made such seemingly moral demands, but because he knew that what the old man said was completely correct. It was not until the arrival of the Fallen Division that the level limit of demonic scholars increased, and the demonic scholars of the old era realized that their path was completely wrong. They all thought that the focus of demonic scholars was on demons, but they didn't realize that the focus was on scholars. Humans cannot use humans as ritual materials, and elves cannot use elves either. If it is a transformed undead, no animal bones can be used as materials. This is a taboo of heavenly sin. Any demonic scholar who has used sacrificial offerings from the same clan and violated the punishment of heaven cannot be promoted to a great sin scholar from this profession. Those level 40 demon scholars can only transform themselves into various demons. That can't even be considered advanced, it can only be considered as using one's own class level to exchange for a stronger race template than humans. Undoubtedly, such limits and abilities will be much weaker than those of the great sin scholar as a hero profession. However, players were unable to use their peers as ritual materials from the beginning, thus failing to meet the conditions for incorrect advancement. Now, James has revealed this secret so clearly. It's a coincidence, or maybe Evans's heart twitched, but he nodded seriously. He extended 2 fingers of his right hand, held them in his ear, and swore word by word, "I swear that I will not use the lives and corpses of my fellow race as my ritual materials and offerings." After his words fell, he suddenly saw a vision, in the darkness, on the snowy mountains. Wearing a silver crown on his head, the brilliant dragon, which looked like crystal, diamond, and silver all over, quietly gazed at him. The illusion only lasted for a very short moment, even less than half a second. But when Evans woke up, he was already sweating profusely. "You feel the gaze of authority, you have obtained the feature. Authority. Silver scale, authority. Silver scale. With this mark as the mark, the silver crown dragon is watching over you, and a certain oath you have made must not be violated. When you attack anyone who violates the oath, gain +1 advantage, divinity. I don't know if it's your luck or misfortune, but just a simple oath made him notice you. It should be a coincidence." The old man behind Evans also seemed to feel something and paused. He remained silent for a while before slowly pushing the wheelchair and whispering, "But no matter what, the God of authority has heard your oath and cannot break it." "Of course." Edwards closed his eyes, feeling a bit tired, and felt his heart beating so fiercely that it felt somewhat blocked. "I will never walk down that path of decadence that cannot be turned back," he said. End of this chapter. Chapter 5 Magic Card Shadow Blade. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Magic Card Shadow Blade. Edwards knew he could definitely participate in the investigation without even obtaining authorization from the Supervisory Bureau. If nothing unexpected happens, he can also conduct an independent investigation. Without being closely monitored by Haina supervision, he can directly participate in the investigation as an assistant of the Supervision Bureau. On the one hand, it's because of the face of my adoptive father, and on the other hand, the Supervisory Bureau, which is bound by the rules of my superiors, has always welcomed the help of outsiders. Since Mr. Shylock started his own law firm, the detective, hired and consulted by the Supervisory Bureau, has even become a profession. If the investigation is not successful, it is because the hired detective is not strong enough to at least avoid strict internal accountability. If everything goes smoothly, it means that the guidance proposed by the Supervision Bureau is correct, at least it can be considered as a contribution and a stable share of benefits. Although Haina is a genuine inspector. But Evans knows more about the Supervisory Bureau than she does. There is a reason why Edwards actively participated in the investigation of this matter. That is revenge in silence. The two versions of the story that Evans told the Supervisory Bureau before were actually fake. Or rather, it's not entirely true. He was indeed a participant in the ceremony and confirmed his recognition of the two demonic scholars. But he is also indeed a ritual offering. Because those two demonic scholars are actually pen pals of Edwards. Edwards has been interested in knowledge related to taboos since childhood. The more mysterious skills were forbidden by the Avalon Kingdom, the more excited he became to study them. For example, ritual magic from the path of transcendence, as well as preservation techniques from the path of dusk. The former is the basic ability of demonic scholars, while one of the professions that extends from the latter is necromancer. From the name, it doesn't sound like a good thing. This taboo knowledge is only briefly outlined in the study of the adoptive father. Hiding forbidden books is a serious crime that can even lead to imprisonment in the Knight family. But after reading the overview, little Evans at that time became even more itchy. He enthusiastically purchased some ritual materials and tried to hold the ceremony solely through speculation and imagination without mastering any extraordinary knowledge and mysterious skills. This will certainly fail. The core secrecy of this world is knowledge. The 9 mystical skills corresponding to the 9 great paths require corresponding knowledge to master. On the other hand, as long as one masters the corresponding knowledge, even if their personal strength is low, they can obtain extraordinary power far beyond their true abilities. Every taboo knowledge is almost the foundation of a school of thought. In this situation, it is impossible to buy a reliable, skill book from the market. On the day of Evans' 16th birthday, a secret society of demonic scholars called Noble Red suddenly contacted him. At first, Evans was very cautious. But the other party sent him several handwritten copies of forbidden books along with the letter, all of which were about demon knowledge and demon rituals. Although they are all small rituals that are not much different from magic. Such as making people grow poisonous sores, treating small wounds, making them drowsy, or making them unlucky. It doesn't seem to be very useful, but those are all true and accurate extraordinary rituals. After trying each one, Evans became very excited. So he became a pen pal with the other party and often exchanged some demonic knowledge, and the other party also identified themselves as friends with Evans. I often chat with him about our emotional life and the trivialities of daily life. At the beginning, Edwards was still a little cautious. But 2 years passed quietly like this. Evans thought that if the other party wanted to deceive him, he might have already deceived him. The value of the secret knowledge they bestow upon themselves is already quite high. Although Evans, who has never been to the black market, is not sure how much this knowledge can be sold for, even if the quality is not enough, in terms of quantity, it is already a lot. How could a scammer operate for so long and invest so much to deceive someone? This is neither reasonable nor reasonable. Not in line with the best interests. So Evans gradually relaxed his guard and truly regarded this pen pal as a friend he had never met before but was very close to. A few days ago, the other party claimed that they had something to do and wanted to come to the capital to meet with Aihuas. Evans believed the other party without hesitation and without any guard. This is the lie he told to the supervisor. Because Evans was not abducted, but actively approached. That is a man and a woman dressed in red, with shaved heads. Men look in their 40s or 50s, while women are around 20 years old. Besides mentors and apprentices, they are also in a romantic relationship. He warmly invited his 2 friends to have a meal, and then the middle-aged man expressed that he could show and even personally participate in the real demon summoning ceremony. And Edwards excitedly agreed. But after he had been busy arranging the ceremony for over an hour, he suddenly realized something as he looked at the ceremony table. Summoning demons, don't you need any expensive materials? At this moment, he suddenly realized that he, who had personally arranged the ceremonial stage, had become a voluntary sacrifice. At the same time, as a student at the Theological Seminary of Wanli Law University, Evans was able to become a pastor before graduation. Although he did not truly embark on the path of the extraordinary, he has taken the first step towards the path of dedication. Reflected on the data card, he already has a level 1 pastor profession. After the experience of the basic skill, basic prayer, is accumulated, Evans can elevate the priest profession to level 2 and master the characteristics of his first path of dedication. Of course, he happily told his pen pals about this. Although pastor is not as interesting as demonic scholar, it is still an extraordinary profession. Being able to embark on extraordinary paths and possess extraordinary abilities is stronger than not having them. More importantly, pastors are also respected professions in Avalon. The symbols of the path of dedication are light, protection, and candles. This is the path of dedicating oneself to others and ideals, and only by practicing this concept from the bottom of one's heart can one become stronger. Therefore, all professions that extend along the path of dedication are extraordinary professions with a bright future and recognized by people. So, as a devout believer of voluntary sacrifice, Evans became a highly esteemed sacrifice. It was not until then that Edwards recalled his past life memories before the crisis of death. Recognized the demon's breed ahead of time and successfully signed a contract with it. He manipulated the shadow demon to launch a surprise attack and kill the middle-aged man, who was also the demonic scholar serving as his mentor. But the woman who was an apprentice is still alive. If she runs any slower, she will be killed by Evans, but if she dares to turn around and take a look, she can turn around and kill Evans. It's almost there. Edward sighed. Almost, he was about to be sacrificed and silenced by that man, and almost, he was about to be killed by that woman. Betrayed, deceived, murdered. The genuine anger in Evans's heart was echoing. He decided to retaliate without hesitation. Not to mention, this woman is highly likely to have seen Evans's letter. This means that once she is arrested, there is a possibility that she will confess to Evans. No, she will definitely confess herself. My adoptive father's position is now unclear, but even if it's just for myself, I must silence her before the Supervisory Bureau catches her. However, Evans also did not intend to expose his identity as a demonic scholar in order to kill the other party. He has a solution. After waking up yesterday, Evans's first reaction was to try a simple ritual that Evans was not aware of and only appeared in the later stages of the game. After using that ritual to supplement his vitality that had been emptied out as a sacrifice, Evans basically confirmed that the secret knowledge he knew was equally useful in this world. Ava's profession in the game is not a demonic scholar who transcends the path, but a pioneer who dedicates the path. That is a pure auxiliary profession that can greatly enhance the strength of teammates and has a small amount of healing and control abilities. But now, he must challenge those situations of extinction crisis alone, and such a weak profession is not feasible. Because the enlightener cannot eat their own reinforcement. Or to put it another way, most professions on the path of dedication cannot receive their own strengthening, protection, or healing skills. However, it is possible for Chihue people to work part-time. After all, Evans's apparent identity is that of a priest dedicated to the path. Transferring to a position of enlightenment can also be prepared in advance, and he is extremely familiar with the necessary path characteristics that need to be mastered to advance into this profession. In order to solve those crises, his main position must have strong single-player combat capabilities. Considering that he can work as a part-time starter, the answer is quite simple. That is version 5.0 of Ava's, which advanced to become the Lord of the Beast after mastering the power of illusion. That is a later career after advancing again as a major crime scholar. After defeating the immortal demons, one can extract their essence and transform them into their own summoning beasts, which are the big beasts, with 6 attributes. Although only one big beast can be summoned at the same time, it can be switched to the most suitable one for handling the current situation, and then use support cards, equipment cards, and field cards made by extracting the power of other big beasts to strengthen the current one. And most importantly, this summoning beast is considered a teammate. Not only does the output far exceed the main body, but it can also consume all types of buffs given by teammates. In gaming terms, this profession has the highest rate of cheating. Because the cards only provide noble mechanism-based enhancements, such as 3 speed, armor piercing, poison, burn, dodge, and spell penetration, but they do not increase damage-based enhancements. Coincidentally, it will not be diluted by various damage-increasing buffs, which are the most mainstream auxiliary of the Enlightener. Although after summoning the Great Beast, the main body cannot receive attack-type buffs, so its output may be somewhat weak. However, during the burst cycle, the Lord of the Great Beast can temporarily combine the summoned and strengthened Great Beast with himself, thus unleashing extremely strong strength. By cooperating with the Lord of the Great Beast, Awaz can use his summoned beast as a teammate to strengthen. And it will not lose the social benefits brought by the priest's identity on the surface, and can also switch to summoning beasts that can counter different enemies, with a high limit. In the worst-case scenario, it is expected that only oneself can compete against the boss. So this career combination may not be the most explosive in an ideal state, but it must be the most comprehensive and adaptable. The ability to extract the power of upper-level illusions and use tarot cards as materials to create illusion cards comes from the pre-professional felon scholar. After thoroughly studying and analyzing an illusion, a great crime scholar can obtain corresponding ritual knowledge. This illusion can be used to print what cards, materials, and rituals are needed. Once this knowledge is known, even demonic scholars can make it in advance. The most important prerequisite for advancing to become the master of the Great Beast is to use the abilities of the Great Sin Scholar to create 6 blank cards with different attributes, and seal each of the 6 corresponding attribute illusions. Then repeatedly defeat the same attribute of magic demons as experience materials, and feed all 6 magic demons to their full levels. According to Evans's memory, there was an upper-level demon with a fire attribute on Yulia. It was precisely to support that demon that her body was so weak. That demon will take Yulia's life after it develops. If you want to save her, you must face that childhood demon directly, and the illusion is immortal. This means that conventional means cannot save Yulia. At most, it can only delay the time when the illusion wakes up and loses control. The Lord of the Great Beast is different. If Evans can successfully create a blank card with enough capacity to accommodate the demons inside Yulia's body, he can directly remove the consciousness of the demons inside Yulia's body. In this way, not only can Yulia survive, but she can also prepare advanced materials for the Lord of the Beast in advance. And Yulia can also obtain the residual energy of the illusion. Making this unstable and dangerous force stable and capable of growth, and thus embarking on the path of the extraordinary. The foundation of all of this is that the ritual of making cards in Evans's memory is reliable and feasible. He has already experimented with other rituals before, and the ritual knowledge in the game can indeed be used. But the production of magic cards requires an additional verification. Because the Great Sin Scholar emerged as a profession only after the arrival of the Fallen Division. Now that 2 full versions have been advanced, Evans is not sure if this ceremony can already run. So he needs an experiment. As long as Avas can successfully create any magic card as a demon scholar, he can directly confirm that this system is still usable at present. In this way, he can gain another power unrelated to demonic scholars. His own revenge and silencing actions will become smooth. Yulia will be saved. Even the collapse of Avalon is not irreversible, as long as he can smoothly create his own first card. Now Evans is still too weak. The only extraordinary existence that he has mastered and is close to the upper-level illusion is the Shadow Demon. The only card that can be made by drawing Shadow Demons is Moon. To create a Moon card, no matter how strong the power sealed on the card is, it requires a nail on the forehead of a criminal who has been sentenced to a car crash, as well as ancient ropes from 3 gallows as materials. Edward sat solemnly at his desk, taking out a slightly blackened tarot card from the jade box. These tarot cards were one of the many unused mystical items purchased by Edwards during his fervent worship of various rituals. But now it happens to be able to be used to make magic cards for the Lord of the Beasts. On that tarot card is a moon painted, with 2 tall towers on either side. Under the moon, there is a wolf and a dog, both barking wildly at the moon. At the center and bottom of the screen is a lobster crawling out of the river, looking up at the sky in confusion. This is the moon. The moon card in tarot divination symbolizes confusion, distress, and unease. The creators of tarot cards come from the prophets who adapted to the path. Prophets despise astrologers who belong to the same path of adaptation and compare them to dogs barking at the moon. Because all prophets agree that the future can never be accurately predicted, and astrologers strive to create a sufficiently complex, accurate, and predictable, great unified star map that can predict all the future. This behavior is considered very ridiculous by the prophets. It's like a dog barking at the moon, trying to figure out what it actually represents. But this is exposing their ignorance and fearlessness. Evans held his breath and became extremely careful. Because he had smeared mercury on the moon of that tarot card. He used this as a medium and injected 3 points of his dark attribute mana yesterday. Nowadays, the dark attribute mana pool of Evans has a maximum capacity of only 3 points. Creating the most basic and weakest card also requires at least 5 points. No matter how strong the card is made, the other materials used are the same, with the only difference being the amount of gemstone powder used. Although this kind of weak card may be a waste of materials when manufactured. But at least once is the key to success, and verifying its feasibility is more important. And it is also a reusable magic scroll at the very least. Once the card is completed, it only takes 1/10 of the mana to induce it, and less than 1 point is considered 0. The only limitation is that cards made of the same type of tarot can only be used once a day. That is to say, if Evans uses this moon card, he cannot use other moon cards on the same day. But it doesn't matter. If you don't need it anymore, you can either sell it or give it as a gift. It can be triggered without mana, and the portable spell scroll that automatically charges every day will definitely sell for a good price. From this perspective, these ritual materials cannot be considered as waste. Evans injected his 3 dark attribute mana into the card yesterday. That's why this card is turning slightly black, not an illusion, but rather it is indeed weakly absorbing the surrounding light. If placed under the sun and compared with the surrounding objects, it may be more noticeable. Now, Ava's mana pool is fully restored. He gently touched the moon once again, which had been smeared with mercury, slowly injecting all 3 dark attribute mana into his body. Cards made with 6 mana points will be slightly stronger than those made with 5 mana points. Unfortunately. Edward sighed softly, let's make one first. The materials for the remaining 3 should be made when the mana increases in the future. After the card reaches the bottom 5 points, the ritual is immediately activated. If not made immediately, it will be scrapped in an hour. Otherwise, Evans could even accumulate mana day by day and keep it for 10 days. Create a venue card shadow seller that requires 30 mana points to complete. He can actually inject a little more today and start making with 7 mana points tomorrow. But from 5 to 10, the mana produced is the weakest, enchanted card. Shadow Blade. No matter how much you hoard, there won't be a qualitative change. It's better to grab an extra day. With this thought in mind, he hammered the rusty nail hard towards the tarot card. With a creaking sound, the card made a strange sour sound. Just like how Evans didn't nail a card, but rather someone's skull. Next, he looped the 3 ropes together. He pulled towards the nail from 3 angles. And the other 3 ends of the rope were nailed to 3 sword cards with ordinary nails. The next moment, the rope suddenly inflated and expanded. Although it was just hanging a nail, it seemed like it had caught someone's neck, and the 3 ropes suddenly turned into a circle instead of a V. And then Evans evenly sprinkled the pre-ground black pearl powder onto the tarot card. The moon card belongs to the realm of the path of love. Black pearls are the guardian gemstones of the path of love, which can be used to attract the gaze of the pillar god, Eternal Me, on the path of love. Just a glance, even a mere gaze, is enough to imbue the card with spirituality. After finishing what he had to do, Evans remained calm and motionless. The shadow beneath him was like wisps of smoke, rising and merging into the cards. The painting on that tarot card constantly changes, as if another painter is altering it. When the change in the picture ended, the nail slowly melted as well. It has become a new moon, and 2 of the 3 ropes have merged into 2 new, black towers, becoming 2 dog-headed people holding scepters. The remaining one replaced the original position of the lobster and became a black scarab. The card automatically floated up and flew into the hands of Evans. In his eyes, the attributes of the card had automatically appeared. Enchantment. Shadow Blade, Moon, necessary. Dark Zero, instant, contact, immediate effect, effect. Temporarily grants the target, weapon, shadow, cutting, and erosion attributes, considered an extraordinary weapon. Lasts for 1 minute, plus 20%, it's done. Evans thought to himself. Today is also a 10,000-word update, please follow up. End of this chapter. Chapter 6 Dungeon. Guilty Hub Pelican Bar. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Dungeon. Evil Hub Pelican Bar. The next morning, Inspector Haina arrived at the Moriarty estate with an authorization from the Supervisory Bureau. This time, she obviously learned from yesterday's lesson. After having a simple breakfast, Haina immediately rushed over, covered in dust and dust. When it arrived, it was not even 7 o'clock. At this point, Evans hasn't even woken up yet. So Oswald, the housekeeper, had to put her in the reception hall first, and let the maid serve her with some tea and dim sum. It wasn't until Evans woke up, finished washing up, and finished breakfast that Oswald told him that the Haina inspector had been waiting in the reception hall. You came so early this time, Senior. Didn't you make an appointment at 9:30? Edward sat in a wheelchair and was slowly pushed into the living room by Oswald. As soon as he entered the door, he saw Haina dressed in formal attire. Unlike what she wore when she arrived yesterday, Haina is now wearing a split-style 2-piece leather suit. However, this leather armor is closer to a uniform than armor. It was not able to fully cover all skin, although it could still provide some protective effect. Perhaps more significance lies in its ritualistic nature. Armor is sacred in the Avalon Kingdom. In the Avalon Kingdom, the main power classes are divided into knights and civil servants in the civil service system. The former includes not only hereditary knights who can enter the Senate, but also supervisors, arbitrators, and the entire cavalry system. Only knights can wear armor, and members of parliament must also wear full armor when entering the Senate. Entering the Senate in regular attire is seen as a provocation to the authority of the Round Table Hall. Except for knights, anyone wearing or even holding armor can be directly sentenced to the harshest punishment of the death penalty. Even in the knight family, the children of the head of the household cannot wear their parents' armor without authorization from the Queen. Therefore, as long as you see someone wearing armor on the street, you can directly recognize their identity. Even from the specifications of the armor, one can recognize the opponent's level. The more difficult it is to move, the stronger the material, the more majestic the appearance, and the closer the color is to silver white, the higher its status. This is not an experience from the game. After all, the Avalon Kingdom was destroyed too early. The knowledge about this aspect comes entirely from the memory and common sense of little Evans. Evans could see that Haina's leather armor was brand new. Even a slight smell of oil can be smelled. That's why Haina didn't dare to sit on the sofa at Moriarty's house. She sat cautiously on the corner of the sofa, sitting upright. I'm afraid that accidentally dirtying it will cause people to dislike it. It's better to arrive early than late. Haina saw that Evans had arrived and immediately took a deep breath. She hurriedly stood up from the soft sofa and said, "It's okay, Mr. Evans. I can act at your convenience. This is the request given by the authorities." Evans raised an eyebrow. "Last time I was 2.5 hours late, this time I was 3 hours early. I feel like you're a bit too extreme." "What?" Haina was a bit confused. "It's nothing," Evans smiled slightly. "The leather armor looks very nice. This was specially approved by the office for me." Upon hearing these words, Haina suddenly perked up and said, "Although my equipment and the Griffin have been approved, they are still on the way to deployment. The director said it may take another 2 months to get them. But because I reported your situation, the director felt that if you had an accident, the Supervision Bureau would cause trouble, but if you didn't agree, it would also cause trouble. And if you sent many people to follow you, you might not be happy, but if I let you have an accident, the problem would be even bigger. So, the director made an exception and gave me Jia and Jian first." As she spoke, Haina happily patted the sword she had placed on the table. Evans followed her gaze and looked over together. "That is a leaf-shaped short sword with a silver glow shining on its scabbard. It is about 24 inches long, which is 60 centimeters. The scabbard is etched with beautiful thorny patterns, and there are red, green, and blue sand-sized broken glass inlaid in the middle of the thorns, appearing dazzling under the reflection of sunlight outside the window. At first glance, it is clear that it is a very typical elf style. Useful or not, at least very attractive. Because the appearance of this sword is too beautiful, it is really different from the somewhat simple leather armor style on Haina's body. On the contrary, it blends very naturally with the elven-style ornaments in Edwards's home. At first glance, Evans thought it was his own artistic ornament. So it was you who brought it. It's okay then. I will definitely take good care of you," Haina said with unwavering determination. Her calloused fingers carefully brushed the thorny lines on the scabbard. After holding the sword in her hand, the confident aura on her body suddenly ignited. Unlike last night's timidity, clumsiness, and caution, the whole person's temperament has become different. Even the eyes became bright. For example, it's like the difference between a horror game player without a gun and a horror game player with a gun. Evans looked deeply into Haina's eyes, lost in silence and contemplation. He could notice that she clearly didn't sleep well last night. It could be said she was excited and restless. Of course, there are also reasons for early exposure to one's own sword here. But more excitement lies in her belief that she can finally showcase her skills. After yesterday's test, today's contact, and investigation of her background, now Ivaz is able to roughly explore and organize Haina's thought process. She is obviously not very smart, and once things become complicated, she becomes lazy to think logically. At the same time, she should have come from a humble background but also possess extraordinary talents in her own field, such as swordsmanship, which she can be proud of. Therefore, her personality will gradually tend to become stubborn, and instead of hesitation, reflection, and complex analysis, she will be willing to trust her intuitive judgments. Simply put, it is a kind of martial arts obsession. Because her background is indeed average, as a village maid who never dresses up, her appearance naturally cannot compare to the exquisite young ladies of Wangdu. Therefore, she will have a shallow sense of inferiority that she has not even noticed. This kind of inferiority complex can turn into aggression and hostility towards people who hold more status than oneself. But at the same time, she is afraid of causing trouble for herself without a background, so it will not become a definite word or action. But it can still be revealed from the attitude under pressure and the instinctive reactions during decision-making. Because of her straightforward personality, easier to come by background, excellent academic performance, and survival wisdom that does not easily offend others. So she will be very popular in the school environment, especially among students with relatively simple thoughts. But this way, she will easily become confused, even manipulated, and even go astray in life when she first encounters society. Now is the moment when she feels lost. This kind of person is completely exploitable. The kind of weakness and helplessness that Evans saw her yesterday was precisely the posture he carefully selected after consulting Haina's information beforehand, which was most likely to attract her in the first place. The act of reading poetry collections can give people a subconscious hint, making them feel that they are not active. The wheelchair under him further reinforces this intention of stillness, thus avoiding Haina, who has confidence in areas such as sports, physical fitness, and swordsmanship, from facing each other head-on, and preventing himself from immediately arousing the opponent's competitiveness or attention. Edwards has looked in the mirror and his aesthetic is normal. He certainly knows that his current physical appearance is quite impressive. So on this basis, Edwards had already hired a close maid to apply makeup to himself, creating a face that seemed weak and pale due to blood loss. A well-adjusted fireplace will give a sense of relaxation in its temperature, while the firelight can provide a warm tone filter for Edwards. In this way, the image of Evans will trigger Haina's desire for protection, at least not to provoke her hostility due to her background. A weak, injured, and handsome superior is completely under her control at this moment, which will make her hope that Evans is good. In this way, he will not become his enemy. At this point, Haina's instinct will tell her not to continue investigating. Her work experience is not yet rich enough, and her behavior is easily guided by emotions. After she had already given herself an answer, she was actually just searching for evidence for that answer. However, when a person's impression is too strong, their image is easily abstracted and one-sided in memory. If Haina's favorability towards Aihua is too high, then when Aihua makes actions that do not meet her expectations, she will be self-disappointed. Therefore, Evans needs to do some things in advance to make his first impression not so good or perfect. So he took advantage of Haina's tardiness and revealed some truths that she didn't want to believe, making her feel like he was attacking her. In fact, she, who was at fault first, was actually hoping that Evans would attack her. This way, she can actually relax a bit. After she understood Edward's strange words as attacks, she would subconsciously eliminate their possibility. And when Evans suggested a possibility she could accept, she immediately attached herself to it, in order to reduce her guilt and relieve psychological pressure. So today and in the future, she can become her very reliable bodyguard. After yesterday's contact and communication, Haina thought they had become friends. And she urgently needs to showcase her proud strength. Her swordsmanship. In front of this noble and innocent, gentle and artistic, weak and handsome new friend. If she can truly demonstrate this, she will feel that she has already demonstrated her proudest strengths. So I hope to receive recognition from Evans. If Evans affirms in this regard and expresses that she truly needs her help, this request will greatly satisfy her social needs. In that case, despite being a suspect and being wary and guarded by her before contact, Evans could become her good friend in just one day of contact. From this, it is natural to bring Evans into her social circle at school. Despite bullying a young girl who had just graduated, it made Evans feel a bit uncomfortable. This is his debt. And Edwards has never liked to owe favors. Once you owe a favor, you must immediately find a way to repay it. Otherwise, it's easy to get close to others by coming and going. Having friends is a very dangerous thing, often dragging oneself into a dangerous situation to help friends, and easily being betrayed in pain due to relaxing vigilance towards friends. Edwards has never liked to have too close relationships with others. That will only make him feel nervous and uncomfortable. It's better for both sides to maintain a state of mutual assistance and utilization. Staying in a healthy, efficient, and renewable business relationship, one will not feel sad or resentful for the betrayal of the other party, nor will they feel hesitant or guilty when preparing to betray others. The predecessor of Edwards today is an example. Because of being too enthusiastic and naive, I trusted my pen pals and regarded them as my own friends, and indeed paid a painful price. But it's also a very simple thing for him to repay the favor. However, in Evans's memory, the name Haina was not included in the game. If nothing unexpected happens, she should have died in battle in the first version of the game because Avalon was invaded. Edwards did not save Avalon for her, he did it for the stability of his own life. So by the way, rescuing her together cannot be considered a gesture of goodwill. But with Haina's personality, knowledge, and ability, there will inevitably be many villains in school who, like herself, have ulterior motives and will try to become her fake friends. Edwards was able to easily identify those people and help her distinguish between those trustworthy and less easily betrayed true friends. He is very good at analyzing others. If you really want to say it, the HR profession has a somewhat Eastern style. Not only does it require a sharp gaze and an objective attitude, but it must also be cold enough and able to strike hard. Just a light tick means getting someone eliminated, losing their job, lowering their salary. And this is precisely the job of Evans itself. The advantage of the Further East factory is that ordinary employees should not easily offend HR. In fact, HR from different companies in the same industry are usually in the same group and circle. A person from a certain company has committed something foolish, offended someone, and had a black history. When asked in the group, everyone will know. It's not a secret at all. As long as you are still a social animal and changing jobs within the same industry, you cannot offend HR. At least we cannot offend the first two because background checks only investigate the first two. Edwards only recently experienced a full 3 years of unemployment. Just as I found a job, I came to this world with a precarious future before officially taking office. Despite his calm attitude and calm expression, he has already conducted a psychological analysis of himself. He now feels a strong sense of instability. He is very satisfied with his current life, but also has a clear understanding of future disasters. He urgently hopes to have a stable life and does not want to become a lost nation, homeless, and wandering around. In order to confront the fear of the future from this world, he must climb up as quickly as possible. To gain some power over the Avalon Kingdom. At the very least, we must not let our teammates behind us hold him back while we are fighting against the world's enemies alone. That is definitely not a delusion of victimization. Evans can be certain. His vision is longer-term than the vast majority of people in this world, and their decisions based on known intelligence must be incomplete. And it is also impossible for Evans to easily reveal the future prophecies he has obtained. He is not a saint. This prophet's intelligence can become his precious treasure. That's why Evans needs to gain enough influence. It's not the name of my adoptive father's knight. That kind of thing can only be considered a nominal status, even if it enters the Senate. It is just a battle of wits and courage with a group of old and sophisticated people. Anything you want to do will become sticky like water, unable to be fully utilized. The feeling of life going with the flow and fate not being under one's control is very uncomfortable. What Evans wants is for those in power to come and ask his opinions before making decisions. He can't be one of them. It's better not to approach any faction. We cannot become victims of internal power struggles, but rather a higher being than them. Not to control others, but to make oneself uncontrollable. It is to prevent oneself from being sacrificed and to avoid sacrificing others. Evans vaguely remembered that this incident would ultimately directly involve a certain minister. In the original history, it was the players who gained high reputation by resolving this event. And since there is no player character in this world, he must join the investigation into this incident. Fortunately, thanks to Julia's blessing. Although Evans still skipped the plot animation, he still remembered some details to some extent. For example, where is the most crucial intelligence, such as which enemies are in the last instance opened and how high their levels are. Because after a chaotic investigation, the first instance of this game will be opened. Level 10 Dungeon, Evil Hub Pelican Bar. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Armed with a sharp weapon, killing heart starts from the beginning. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Armed with a sharp weapon, killing heart starts from the beginning. Oswald did not provide any accompanying opinions. Obviously, although he didn't have much confidence in the time concept and intelligence of the student he taught, he believed in her military prowess. This also confirms Edward's judgment. Although he couldn't see the attribute version of Haina, just thinking about it, he knew. After all, she was the best group of high-quality students among the best extraordinary schools in the country. In the absence of resources and early education, her ability to keep up with the curriculum and even stand out among the elites nationwide has proven her qualifications. Although she is now proud of her decision to become a royal censor before graduation, in reality, it is nothing. Although the supervisory bureau is also an armored profession, its status cannot be considered high. Usually, civil cases are handled. The main responsibilities include street patrols, maintaining public order, checking whether each shop meets safety standards, investigating some relatively simple cases of extraordinary people, accepting reports from the public, dispersing illegal gatherings, arresting low-level extraordinary people, and so on. When encountering formidable enemies such as enemy spies, high-level superhumans, and cultists, the inspectorate will appear, and if a member of the Knight family violates such a serious case, the highest-ranking arbitration court will be allowed to appear. Arbitrator is a high-level profession starting from level 30, and all members are young and middle-aged knights who can enter the round table hall. Extremely wealthy, well-equipped, and experienced, it is Avalon's most advanced elite unit. The ones who are even higher are those top-tier powerhouses with a number of them. Although Haina doesn't have a good background. Even before graduation, she appears clumsy and naive due to lack of experience and training. But according to Edward's experience, it is not a good thing to have a strong personal ability, no background, and a straightforward and simple personality. She has now been sent to the District Supervision Bureau as a frontline supervisor, which not only allows her to quickly accumulate experience, but also lowers her personal expectations for herself. Haina is completely unaware of her own value. If she adapts to a job that clearly does not match her education and abilities, then the leader who pushed her out of the box will become a grateful benefactor. In a few more years, as she interacts with society and accumulates sufficient work experience, her extraordinary career level will also improve. At the worst, she will be able to obtain the position of district director or higher before the age of 30. If everything goes smoothly, there is a chance to join the inspectorate at the age of 30. It is not impossible for the Queen to bestow armor and enter the round table before the age of 40. Edwards estimated that she should have a career level of around 20. That is to say, the degree to which one masters the extraordinary power of the second or even third energy level. At least 10 levels higher than oneself. It's not difficult to make a level 10 dungeon with a level 20 boss. Just in case, Oswald also gave Evans a pistol for self-defense in emergency situations. That is a delicate lady's pistol. Its design is similar to Haina's short sword style, with hollow silver thorns on the outer shell. It is about the size of a palm, not a common revolver of this era, but a pneumatic magazine pistol. Ladies grip +2, refined weapon, dark blue, firearms, continuous firing pistol, capacity of 5 rounds, 8mm bullets, 5/5 feature. Its weight and volume are only 60% of the same power pistol, elf style. Significantly reduces failure rate and increases maintenance costs, module. Elegant aiming. Additional significant increase in accuracy, module. Light shooting. Additional reduction in recoil, it's also okay. Ladies pistol. After seeing his attributes clearly, Evans, who had originally intended to politely decline, happily accepted it. Refined weapons are already the strongest level that ordinary craftsmen can create. Compared to the purple extraordinary weapon that requires extraordinary power to be manufactured, it is only one level inferior. What more bicycles do you need? In the game, dungeons after level 30 are generally required to have stable explosive blue equipment. And purple extraordinary weapons need to be made through ritual spells and alchemy, or by killing high-level extraordinary beings before they can be dropped. Not to mention that the mod of this gun is quite good. The attributes of the blue suit are only fixed in terms of features and style, and the remaining 1 to 3 random attributes are all random. There are both positive and negative attributes. Double positive entry, and the attributes of recoil and accuracy, are also combined. This is a tool-type weapon that can be used even in the mid to late stage. At least it can be used to quickly fire some special effects bullets and ritual bullets that do not require damage. Even high-level pistols may cause higher damage, but their accuracy may not necessarily be as high. But just before Evans left, Oswald suddenly stopped him. The master said, "Remember to wear this. And put on the cloak." As he spoke, he handed Evans a black collar and a black hooded jacket. Evans pinched the collar and quickly realized its material. Asbestos. Hanging parties have been rampant recently. If you plan to leave White Queens, it's better to wear anti-hanging neck guards. Oswald, who looked like a tall and thin ghost, said solemnly, "They are quick to take action, and Ms. Haina may not always be able to protect you. The hood is to conceal your identity. To prevent those with ulterior motives from taking note of your face." Edwards reluctantly put it on. He has heard of the hanging party. That is an upgraded version of a bandit. In order to track themselves without leaving any survivors and also improve work efficiency, they will suddenly jump out when passers-by pass through sparsely populated areas or alleyways, use thin ropes to strangle their necks and drag them into the shadows. After successfully strangling the other person, remove all valuable and worthless items from their entire body. Citizens are unable to report the case in a timely manner, and even the body is not easily discovered. Because it is a direct kill, rather than subduing or intimidating the opponent, it can also prevent oneself from being counterkilled by low-level supernatural beings. Although asbestos causes cancer, life is still more important. After all, you don't have to have long-term contact either. It's not that my level is too low. If I had levels 20 or 30 now, would I still be afraid of those petty thieves? As the old butler watched as Evans put on a neck guard and a black cloak, he handed him a thick stack of money and said, "This is the investigation funding from the master. This is just your first investigation, so it shouldn't take too much." Evans could hear clearly, and Haina let out a soft hiss beside him. He counted slightly. There are a total of 20 silver white, slightly reflective large banknotes, with crossed scepter and sword printed on them, and a white crown placed in front. This symbolizes the god of authority, the silver-crowned dragon. There are also 20 red, medium-sized banknotes. There are 10 candles with 5 red candles painted on them, and there is also a number 5, there are still 10 pictures with only one drawn, and one number 1. This represents the deity on the path of dedication, and is also the candlestick served by the church. This is a unique banknote of the Avalon Kingdom that can also circulate in other countries. The purchasing power of a white crown is about 1,000 yuan, and it can be exchanged for 20 red candles with a face value of 1. A red candle with a face value of 1 can be exchanged for 10 small brown banknotes with the lowest face value, known as the copper hourglass. The hourglass is a divine symbol of the balanced path. In the Avalon Kingdom, only these 3 paths of extraordinary professions are legal. That is to say, the value of a copper coin is approximately equivalent to 5 yuan, while a red coin with a face value of 1 is equivalent to 50 yuan. Ordering a grilled beef in the restaurant costs about 6 copper hourglasses, and ordering smoked pork costs 2 copper coins. A brand new and durable outfit, excluding leather shoes, costs about 7 red coins. Remember to separate red and white coins. It's best to keep them in 3 pockets. Oswald cautioned, if you can pay with only low-denomination red coins, then don't casually show that you still have a large amount of white coins in hand. You have difficulty moving and no male servants accompanying you. There may be more people watching you. Those white crowns are used to buy high-value targets, so don't use them if you can. If the red coins are not enough, you can go to the bank to exchange the white coins for red coins. If you are really worried about taking the wrong ones, Ms. Haina can also help you take them. I am not a lady. Haina whispered, but did not refuse. Without hesitation, Evans pushed the entire stack of white coins into her hand and said, "Take it." Although it was just a proxy holding, she was still a bit excited with this large sum of money. In terms of quantity, 20 white coins are actually not much. The tuition fee for 1 semester at Wanli Law University is exactly 16 white crowns. She has also received so much money before. At least during the first 2 semesters of freshman year, tuition fees were still scraped together from home. It was not until her sophomore year that she received the scholarship and deducted her tuition fees. Moreover, they generally do not use white crown coins for payment in their daily lives. The most commonly used denominations are copper coins and red coins, and the feeling of holding white coins in her hand makes her so unfamiliar. But what actually made her most nervous was that she was particularly afraid that she might accidentally lose the money. In fact, she has also lost money before. When she was very young, she accidentally lost her tuition due to running wildly on the road. As a result, her mother cried that day. That was not a heart-wrenching cry, but just hiding on the side silently wiping away tears. But that scene was deeply engraved in Haina's heart. From then on, she will no longer run wild as she pleases on the road. Whenever she wants to run, she feels a pendant tied to her legs. She carefully searched several pockets on herself before finding one that could hold the money with some peace of mind. But she didn't dare to take her hand away either, so she could only use her elbow to vaguely cover her pocket and occasionally use her hand to confirm whether the money was still there. The other hand is placed next to the short sword that one sees as life. She held a cautious posture and pushed Evans's wheelchair away from Moriarty Manor. "Where are we going?" She instinctively asked Evans, "Is it the warehouse where the incident occurred the day before yesterday? Or should we go to Stone Arch Park?" "No." Observing Haina's attitude, Evans took a soft breath. "That place has already been dug up. You must have found all the intelligence you can get. Let's go east to the Pelican Bar." Edward said. "Where is that?" Haina clearly didn't recognize the place name. Or, to put it another way, she doesn't know any place in the royal capital except for the 2 streets around the university in Red Queen's and the line between the White Queen's Inspectorate where she currently works and the Moriarty estate. Her monthly living allowance of 50 red candles is only equivalent to 1 month's salary for a laborer. This level of living expenses does not allow her to run around in Wangdu. In the labor zone. Labor zone. Over at the port. Haina's face changed and suddenly remembered the name of this bar. She has indeed heard the name of this bar. When I first arrived at the capital, I was advised by my good friend who told me not to go to the labor camp if I had nothing to do. She trusts each other very much, so even if her roommates often encourage her to go to bars in the labor camp, she is very determined not to go. Of course, another part of the reason is that there is really no money. And she felt embarrassed to ask her friends to treat her. Because she made up her mind not to go, she automatically blocked those words in her mind. She was afraid that she would listen too much, so she accidentally got distracted. Haina remembered that the name she had heard the most was probably Captain's Bar. There are often kingdom sailors on vacation who go there to drink. They love to go there and find handsome men. Young, strong, handsome, and never meet women when going out to sea for a long time. One catch. She had a roommate and found a young sailor as her boyfriend. It is said that he is still a sergeant, always boasting about what secret mission he is carrying out. I don't know if it's true or false. If it's really a secret, can you tell these female college students? Haina is not very confident. In the small town where she was born, the blacksmith always boasted that he had lived in Wandu before, had knowledge and culture. Later, when she came to Wandu on her own, she found out that the meaning of Uncle's stay was that he wandered to Wandu as an apprentice at the age of 12 or 13 to learn handicrafts, but couldn't resist staying for a few years before running away. At that time, he boasted about his appearance, which was exactly the same as that of the sailor. And her roommate only mentioned Pelican Bar to them once. The reason why Haina was impressed was that only when she mentioned the Pelican Bar, did the sister's face for the first time not have that cheap and sneaky smile, but was very serious and serious. What she said at the time was, "Go buy some materials." Is Pelican Bar a place that sells what materials? Haina's heart was filled with doubts, but she didn't say anything. She instinctively felt that it was something bad and dared not speak out in the Moriarty manner. Especially under the gaze of the elf butler. For a moment, Haina also felt a bit tempted. She had never dared to come to such a place before, on the one hand afraid of spending money, and on the other hand afraid of danger. But now, I have become stronger. Still dressed in armor representing the glory of justice, and with investigation funds in his hands, Evans was finally able to go to places she was once curious about but never had the opportunity to visit. After all, this is also her first independent investigation. Haina also had no investigative ideas. Previously, she mentioned the warehouse and the stone arch just because she happened to remember these two locations. Even Director Kent did not request any important intelligence from her in this investigation, but only asked her to protect Evans and not act recklessly. Of course she will protect him. No special instructions are needed. The labor union zone is the labor union zone, let's go. Haina readily replied, I will protect you. If any petty thief who doesn't have long eyes dares to trouble you, I will let him know what legal and just punishment is. Only when talking about this topic, her voice was loud and clear. Even impatient. Carrying a sharp weapon, the heart of killing arises from within. This was all within Edward's expectations. After training for so long, the level has been raised to this level, but I have never really fought against enemies. It's normal to feel excited. So, are you ready to kill, Senior? Evans squinted his eyes like a fox, with a smile of goodwill or sarcasm on the corner of his mouth. Haina was taken aback at the words. Immediately, she said seriously, in fact, I have already killed someone. Oh. Evans raised his eyebrows. This is an unexpected answer. Then let's go. He didn't ask further, just whispered, I'm not good at using my legs, so please push me. It should be. Haina breathed a sigh of relief and quickly replied. Today is still a 9,000-word update, it has already been signed. Seeking follow-up reading, offering rewards, and obtaining monthly tickets, end of this chapter. Chapter 8. Haina wants to listen to secrets. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Haina wants to listen to secrets. Evans sat securely in the wheelchair, gently pushed by Haina from behind. This feeling is very comfortable. Especially when Iwasi's legs and feet are actually fine, it immediately feels even more comfortable. He even closed his eyes and basked comfortably in the early winter sun, feeling drowsy. In an instant, I had the illusion that I was already old enough to retire and was taken out for a walk by my daughter to bask in the sun. Wrapped in a black cloak, Evans only showed half of his chin, quietly observing his surroundings. So Evans saw an interesting phenomenon very clearly. No one was afraid of the passers-by walking around the Moriarty estate when they saw Haina dressed up as a supervisor. They just glanced and passed by as usual. But as they left the White Queen's area and gradually penetrated the labor zone towards the southeast, the situation began to gradually change. The passers-by looked at Haina's surveillance gaze and gradually became frightened. They will deliberately avoid Haina's course of action in advance, and even stop every 10 meters to make way to the side, carefully giving way to Haina. When Haina entered a fresh food market, a terrifying solemnity centered around her quickly spread among the crowd. When residents realized that the surveillance was pushing some big shots in, some crowded crowds automatically dispersed towards both sides. That was a miracle like Moses dividing the sea. Even though the crowd was clamoring and jostling, the wheelchair under Edwards never stopped throughout the journey. No one dared to stand in front of him, no one came to talk, and even dared not speak loudly, disturbing the tightly wrapped mysterious person. Even the residents who were buying things before have stopped their trading conversations. They watched with curiosity and some fear as Evans slowly passed through the crowd, watching him off. Until they left the market. Did you see it, Haina? After that, Edwards closed his eyes, relaxed his body slightly, and leaned back, whispering, "People are afraid of you." I don't understand why either. Haina did not hide her voice at all, and there was no wavering in her words. There is no criminal, there is no need to be afraid of us. Everyone knows that rules are important in Avalon. It's not a secret but common sense that everyone knows. Since that's the case, don't break the rules, don't break the law. I don't know what they're afraid of. When she said this, she straightened her chest and looked up. His gaze was burning like fire. Edwards was somewhat surprised. I thought you would sympathize with them, said Edwards. Why? Haina asked in response, is it something I didn't do well, or is it just because of my poor background? In terms of background, she seems to be a bit too sensitive. Evans realized that Haina seemed unwilling to mention this topic. But even so, she did not end the unpleasant topic that made her unhappy. Yes, my family is poor. But my parents have told me since I was young to be an upright person. Following the law, loyal to the Queen, and sincere to my teachers. Although I don't have money, I have never done even a small theft. At this point, Haina's voice was filled with a strong sense of confidence. I will not demand that others be like me, because not everyone agrees with the path of authority. But I will try my best to restrain my own behavior. Not because I am forced, but because I am willing to do so. Nowadays, I am devoted to obeying my superiors and executing every command he gives within the rules, but if one day I am higher than him, then he must also obey me equally. This is the way of authority. Avalon's rules. Evans understood. This is the anchor point for Haina to maintain herself. Esteem and confidence in Wanli Law University. The reason why she was able to step into the path of authority early on is precisely because she understood the essence of the path of authority early on. It can even be said that she was intentionally or unintentionally led down this path by her parents since she was very young. She was born for this. Because the extraordinary profession in this world is, in a sense, a projection of thought, philosophy, and personality. It is a small amount of power seeping out from those 9 grand roads. Even those high and immortal deities are just pioneers of these paths. To embark on the 9 great roads, one must fully understand and be determined to pursue this path. A person who does not understand or agree with what is dedication cannot enter the path of dedication. A person who does not understand what art and beauty are cannot step into the path of beauty. Although the Avalon Kingdom emphasizes rules and upholds law, they are not actually practicing the path of law for the sake of fairness and justice. The law is just a tool for authoritarianism. But now naive Haina instinctively understood this most important core idea and did not deviate. It's not easy, Senior. With a slight movement in his heart, the corner of his mouth lifted slightly and he made a gentle voice, I didn't expect you to have such ambition. What ambition? Haina didn't even realize what she had just said unintentionally. Becoming your boss's boss, even climbing higher. Edward said slowly, this is not a concept that belongs to the path of authoritarianism. Unexpectedly, you are also a believer in the path of transcendence. Upon hearing this, Haina was suddenly taken aback. Even the hand pushing the wheelchair paused for a moment. What? Why, aren't you even aware of it yourself? Evans asked in response. His 10 fingers crossed under his windbreaker and he whispered, but actually, this is quite normal. Senior sister, I don't know how you learned in school. However, everyone is ordinary. No one can avoid deviating from their own path. Such as the path of love, wisdom, and dedication. Don't you fall in love with someone? Barbarian, animalistic, and impulsive pursuit of reproduction. This is precisely influenced by the path of love. Every teenager is influenced by the path of love. Similarly, the characteristic of the path of wisdom is utilitarian thinking or the pursuit of truth, and if you are determined to sacrifice your life for others, then you have already entered the path of dedication and been watched by the candlestick. The 9 great paths are the 9 inevitable modes of human thinking, and each person will always have their own bias, and when doing anything, they will somewhat conform to one of them. How many people, besides fanatics, can never deviate from their path? Since that's the case, what's so scary about deviating from one's own path? Evans's voice was low but clear in Haina's ear. Have you ever thought about this question, senior? Why would Avalon follow the path of authority? She only felt an itch in her ears, and her back also itched along with it. Hot blood surges up, even the earlobe heats up. That's not shyness, but excitement and fear. Please speak softly, Mr. Edwards. She lowered her voice and whispered. She is too afraid of being heard of such heretical beliefs. But from another perspective, she is also a bit curious. I feel a little itchy and want to hear more. This is something that no one would tell her at home or at school. Even if she said something she didn't even bother to listen to. But now when she heard it, she felt a sense of identification. I've already thought about it that way. Under this contradictory mentality, she even compared to her 4-year younger brother, Evans, and gave him the respectful title of Sir. So, she instinctively said, please speak softly, instead of, please don't say anything more. But at this moment, Edwards closed his mouth with a smile, humming and chuckling like a villain. Listening to the soft laughter of Evans in the wheelchair, Haina suddenly felt that her ears, neck, and back were no longer itchy. Now she hated it so much that her teeth began to itch. Why didn't you stop talking halfway? So why on earth? But Haina dared not admit that she wanted to listen. That was undoubtedly an act of disloyalty. Can't you just say it yourself? I'll try to persuade you a little bit. If I can't persuade you, won't I? If the timing is right, Evans said, I will tell you. So, when is the right time? It's very simple. Edwards replied, after we resolve this matter and reunite from school. I'll find a quiet place to talk to you. You also understand that this kind of secret is not suitable for telling on the street. Okay. Haina confidently said, you don't need to say it, I will also help you arrest the prisoner. I will listen to what you haven't finished, the second half of this story. At some point, she no longer cared whether she had deviated from the path of authority. Perhaps she had already known in her heart that she had deviated from the path, but now she is willing to accept it. And she hasn't realized anything yet, that's why, unconsciously, the reason she wanted to arrest the prisoner went from being an order from the Supervisory Bureau to helping Edwards arrest the prisoner. But she was completely unaware. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Yes, I like children. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Yes, I like children. After a 2-hour journey, Haina did not feel any fatigue. As they leave the Red and White Queens, which serve as the center of the capital, Glass Island, the number of factories emitting thick smoke and speeding trains gradually increases. The choking thick fog was accompanied by the fishy smell of fish and shrimp, and the sound of a whistle mixed with the cries of vendors. The aroma of baking came from the bakery on the street, and people wearing thick windbreakers and top hats walked through the street. A destitute painter wearing berets sits on the street, painting the pitch-black skyscrapers across the street, as well as the metal pipes swirling around the factory walls like snakes. The inspector, dressed in silver armor, rode a tall and majestic white griffin that was over 2 meters tall, flying over from high altitude. An 11 or 12-year-old red short-haired newsboy, carrying 2 bundles of newspapers, was shouting on the street. The headline of Glass Steps today. Bishop Matthews of the Red Queen Diocese has recently been appointed as a spiritual counselor by Her Majesty the Queen. The number of spiritual counselors from the Church has now increased to 6. The Chancellor of the Exchequer plans to tax matches and kerosene lamps next year. The Star Antimony Kingdom has expelled 3 knights from Avalon on charges of murder, espionage, and interference in their domestic affairs. Her Majesty strongly condemns this. The Glass Steps newspaper has sold most of it, leaving only a few copies. The rope must be tight to prevent it from slipping off the shoulder. And the other bundle of newspapers behind the newsboy only sold less than a quarter. He loudly shouted with his slightly cracked lips, "The Labor Union Weekly only needs 5 red coins." Hanging Day is approaching, and the list of death row inmates in November has been determined. 38 people will be sentenced to death this month, the second most month in nearly 3 years, and there is a clear list of death row inmates. The third round of recruitment for apprentices at the Nikasi gypsum factory in the port area has lowered the age to 14. A painter from Green Flute Street committed suicide at home last week. The Lloyd's Bank of Hong Kong was robbed yesterday, and all the robbers have been arrested. Let's all take a look. 1 copy only costs 5 red coins. Senior sister. Edward suddenly spoke up and said, "Help me buy 2 newspapers." Haina was taken aback for a moment and said, "Someone in your family should give you the Glass Steps report. Do you want to buy a copy of the Labor Weekly report? No, let's all buy one, Evans emphasized. Oh, I understand. Haina finally realized. This is Edwards looking at the newsboy who is really working hard and wants him to sell the newspaper earlier. It's almost noon now, no one will buy it. Moreover, this is a labor zone, filled with sailors, fishermen, and laborers who don't have that much money to buy newspapers. She whispered, "Why don't I buy them all?" "No, just buy 1 each." Edward shook his head and said, "That child is working, not begging." "I understand now." Haina stood in awe. She nodded seriously and advised, "I'll go buy the newspaper, be careful." Evans opened his eyes and nodded silently. Haina had just left when a girl tiptoed over. She was a bit dirty on her body, with thin clothes and a lean body. Looking at Evans wearing a hood, the girl hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to address him. "Uncle, buy a bouquet of flowers," she whispered. Obviously, it was noticed that Evans was sitting in a wheelchair. Although it can be determined from the pattern of the wheelchair that Evans should be a wealthy and kind person. Because she just overheard their conversation on the side. But because Evans was suspected to be disabled, her tone when promoting was still not firm enough. Evans reached out and touched her head. When he reached out his hand, the girl's body trembled as if she had been electrocuted, and she lifted back in fear. It's like being afraid of someone hitting her. But because Evans's hands were slow and the hands that popped out of his sleeves were young enough. She quickly realized that she seemed to have addressed herself incorrectly. "It's my brother." Evans spoke softly. His fingertips touched the girl's hair, but only felt dust and grease. Obviously, she hasn't taken a shower for a while. But the girl clearly knows this. She took a step back in panic because Evans touched her hair and apologized to Evans, "I'm sorry, my hair is dirty. I'm leaving now. Let's sell me a bouquet of flowers instead." Evans chuckled lightly and said. He spoke as his outstretched right hand spread out in reverse. Just now, the empty palm suddenly had an extra red coin with a face value of 1. This is not an extraordinary ability, it's just a simple magic trick, but it made the girl's eyes widen. She looked at the banknotes and then at Evans. Obviously, I thought that Edwards was a transcendent adult and hesitated and dared not take his money. And the corner of Edwards's hood slightly raised his mouth. He skillfully clenched his fingers and slowly withdrew the banknote from his hand. But just then, he suddenly let out a soft moan and reached out to touch the girl's neck, saying, "Hey, what's this?" As he spoke, he deftly took out a brand new red coin from the girl's neck. Watching the girl open her eyes in surprise and confusion, it was obvious that she didn't understand how it flew over. Without waiting for the girl to refuse, Evans deftly folded the red coin in half with the 3 fingers of his right hand, and then placed it in the girl's large pocket hanging in front of her chest and abdomen. Evans slightly lifted the corner of his hood and revealed his youthful face to the girl, revealing a heartfelt smile. "Shoo." He reached out his hand and placed it in front of his mouth. "Make a gesture of silence." Immediately after, he put on his hood again and extended his white and slender right hand, saying, "Miss, where are my flowers?" "Ah, here you are." The girl finally realized and handed a withered wild rose to Evans with a slightly red cheek. "Are you buying flowers, Evans?" At this moment, Haina, holding the newspaper, returned somewhat confused. Seeing this, the girl was so frightened that she almost fell directly to the ground. Watching Haina dressed up as a supervisor, her face turned pale and her whole body trembled with fear. But even though she was afraid of it, she still didn't escape immediately. But instead, he forcefully strengthened his courage, trembling and stuttering in a low voice, saying, wait, sir. Also, you need to change." She stubbornly used her trembling hands to carefully point out 9 wrinkled copper coins from the paper bag hidden in her chest, and respectfully handed them to Edwards. Next, she carefully folded the brand new red coin with a face value of 1 that Edwards gave him and put it inside. I breathed a sigh of relief when I received it on the inside of my chest. She was under Haina's gaze all the way, and by the time she left, her legs were already a bit weak with fear. "I'm not that scary, am I?" When people were afraid before, Haina didn't care. But now, perhaps it's because we talked about something with Evans. Or perhaps it was because the girl looked young and innocent, and her fear of it made Haina feel a bit frustrated. After watching the girl walk away, she whispered, "Do you need me to help you throw away the flowers? This dirty wildflower really doesn't match the outfit on Evans." "No need." Edwards replied, "After all, it's the child's intention. Do you seem to really like children?" If Haina had thought for a moment, she realized something. Compared to his attitude towards himself, Edwards had a much friendlier attitude towards those 2 children. "Well, I like innocent children." Edwards nodded in response, rarely deceiving anyone, and said the truth from his heart. "It's like liking cats and dogs, spending time with them can relax. There are many things I like, but I don't like people." "Why does this sound like you're cursing?" As a result, this sentence sounded more like a joke, and Haina also joked, "You can't treat children like cats and dogs. It just sounds like it." Edwards raised his mouth slightly, without much explanation. He is indeed cursing people. It's just a group of adults cursing. In his view, those adults who are dirty-minded, profit-oriented, and have 2 sides are not as good as cats and dogs. Of course, this also includes himself. Amidst laughter and conversation, under the guidance of Edwards, they finally arrived at the Pelican Bar. That's not so much a bar as a residential house or warehouse. Its front door is painted with white paint and depicted in an exaggerated, comic-like form as a pelican with its mouth wide open. And all kinds of fish are filled in its big mouth, floating in beer foam, just like stewing fish with beer in its mouth. And there was also a wooden board hanging next to it, with a large string of onomatopoeic words for drunken hiccups painted in capital letters. This is the sign on the bar. That is to say, strictly speaking, this Pelican Bar should be pronounced as Hiccup Bar. It's almost noon now, but the door is not closed. There are even many guests inside. Obviously, it also operates as a restaurant at noon. At the moment when Haina pushed Evans slowly into the wheelchair, her footsteps suddenly paused. She widened her eyes and fell into shock. Because the bartender leisurely washing the wooden wine glass at the front desk is not actually a human, but a rare wild elf. The elf race, apart from having a lifespan 4 or 5 times longer than humans, is generally much taller than humans. Even females generally grow above 1.8 meters, occasionally reaching up to 2 meters, while male elves even grow up to 2.45 meters. This means that if the elf's upbringing is not good, it is easy to become hunchbacked due to frequent communication with short humans during adolescence. If the tutoring is good, or in other words, elves with parents taking care of them, generally do not hunchback. Therefore, hunchbacked elves are called wild elves. The number of wild elves is much smaller than that of elves. Elves attach great importance to honor, family, and bloodline, and therefore strongly reject wild elves and their parents, believing that this is tarnishing the elf race. Because if the parents of elves die due to honor, they usually entrust their children to the care of relatives and friends. Unless they die out of shame, such as being sentenced to death, they will not entrust their children, either abandoned by their parents or rebellious children who run away from home. They grow into wild elves for these reasons. Wild elves lack the elegance and restraint of elves, but have similar lifespan, wisdom, and extraordinary power to elves, so they are often regarded as unstable elements. They are usually active in rural areas and their professions include scammers, assassins, and mercenaries. All the wild elves in the Glass Island of Wangdu are theoretically registered. Anyone who causes trouble can take their place in the royal capital, so free-spirited wild elves usually disdain to stay in the capital. But for some reason, the wild elf bartender didn't react when he saw Haina. Even just a contemptuous glance at her. On the contrary, when he saw Evans, the bartender was noticeably stunned and even stopped his hand movements for a moment. Even though Evans was wearing a cloak, the bartender easily recognized his identity. It's like never expecting him to come here today. Why, Mr. Bartender? Do you think I should be dead now? Evans squinted his eyes, his deep blue pupils as deep as the sea. Remember to follow up with Meow in the new book. Cat's daily updates are over 6,000 words. End of this chapter. 10. Chapter 10 Bad Behavior Bartender. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Evil Bartender. The surprised expression on the bartender's face flashed by, quickly concealing a restlessness that he didn't want to see the guests at this moment. If you want to drink, sir. And this supervisor. The bartender, dragging a tiring long note and squinting his eyes, said slowly, "It's too early now. This point hasn't been taken yet. Ah, please make a statement beforehand. The dishes in our bar are much more expensive than outside. Don't order them and then find them too expensive. They won't be refunded." For some reason, despite having the same elf accent with long notes and a lot of smooth notes, Haina just felt that the voice of the bartender didn't have the elegant feeling of the steward of Edwards. Perhaps it was because some of the transitions were too hard and clear, or perhaps it was because his throat had a hoarse feeling caused by long-term smoking, which immediately gave him a flowing smell. How much is it expensive? Upon hearing these words, Haina instinctively spoke up and asked. But she quickly realized that she was here to investigate. No matter how expensive the dish is, you have to order it. It's better to say that the investigation funds provided by Butler Oswald were used at this time. So she immediately changed her mind and said, "What dishes do you have here?" Haha. Evans in front of her couldn't help but chuckle softly. It's really a unique experience to investigate with such beginners. Although the wild elf bartender's reaction was quick, he couldn't hide it from Evans. He deliberately referred to Edwards as Mr. Old, as if he had not recognized his identity at all. But this is impossible. He looks like a human elf in his 30s, and he should be at least over 100 years old. As a wild elf, he lives in the market, and the blood of elves made his memory and perception significantly stronger than humans. Even though Edwards was wearing a fully covered cloak, his physique could never have been like an old man. Just by observing the style of his shoes and the exposed chin, he should be able to recognize Edwards. If it weren't Haina following, but Oswald, he would immediately notice that the bartender's behavior was too deliberate. A few days ago, when Evans met with those two pen pals, it was the Pelican Bar that came over. And he was very conspicuous at that time. The Pelican Bar was a specially designated date location for those two pen pals. At that time, Evans was able to walk normally, move flexibly, and had a strong physique. He also wanted to hide his contact and communication with demonic scholars, so he came to the appointment alone. But considering that this was a place that Edwards had never been before, he set off almost 2 hours early and found a coachman to take him directly to the Pelican Bar. To be honest, if it weren't for finding the coachman, Edwards wouldn't have been able to find the Pelican Bar. Who would have known that the name of the Pelican Bar wasn't Pelican? When Evans arrived, it was over an hour earlier than the agreed 5 p.m. But he had already considered this matter, so he brought a book to read in advance. That is a mystical book in the star antimony language, Alchemy's Secret Words. Those alchemists on the path of balance are very concerned about their knowledge leaking out and affecting the balance of the world. Therefore, when they write books and communicate with their peers, they will use some hidden language that lay people cannot understand. For example, king, queen, and queen indicate different things. Similarly, sun and moon, toad, and flying dragon may all imply something. And based on the basic principle of confidentiality to outsiders, each alchemist uses a different type of code language. There is no unified consensus or common industry terminology between each other. They all have their own password books and secretly teach them to their students for decoding, and if it is a sufficiently excellent colleague, they can also understand the meaning he wants to express from that hint. That is to say, I understand what I understand, and I don't understand what I say even if I don't understand. The book Alchemy Code Words provides examples to reveal several classic code words. In the example, the author demonstrated an alchemy process for making antimony glass. That is a type of emetic with slight toxicity. By slightly adjusting the ratio, one can obtain mercury antimony, which is a slightly sweet, thick, and highly toxic substance that can flow. Not to mention anything else, this is knowledge about synthesizing highly toxic substances. This taboo knowledge is poking at the excitement of Edwards. In the noisy bar, he sat in the corner, focused on reading, and in the blink of an eye, it was almost 6 o'clock. Until those two people patted his shoulder and woke him up. Originally, Evans just planned to meet them and leave. It's not that we suspect them, but rather that the security in the labor camp is indeed not good. If delayed too late, even taking a taxi may not be safe. The recent hanging party has caused panic among people. But it was already time for dinner, and they chatted while drinking. The more they chatted, the happier they became, and the more excited they became. So Evans simply used a white coin and ordered a dinner in place, treating two friends to an extremely sumptuous meal. He didn't ask for the remaining change, but instead invited other guests to have a drink. Because his two friends assured him that even if it's a little late, it's okay and they will escort him home. After finishing their meal, they chatted for a long time, and by the time they finally left the bar, it was already over 10 o'clock. 0.0 is the most suitable time to summon demons. The bald man said, it takes about an hour to complete the ceremony. And now it happens to be at this point. Would you like to come and try it yourself? Around that time, he had already gained insight into the burning desire of Evans to touch taboos through those hours of conversation. Knowing this invitation, Evans will definitely not refuse. Looking back now, They should have intentionally scheduled here and were also intentionally late. Since it's time for the meal, I'm starving and there are other guests around ordering. I won't go to other places to eat in a special way. So, the two demonic scholars from the Noble Red Association will specifically name and invite him to meet at the Pelican Bar, and also prevent him from taking them to other places. Can it be understood that they believe only here is absolutely safe? And, a young man from the upper class, who looked extremely handsome and dressed elegantly, spent 2 hours reading a glass of less than half a liter of light beer in a cheap bar filled with laborers and sailors in the labor zone. Since that's the case, is it possible that a bartender with a good memory won't remember him? Even if it's not a wild elf, but a human bartender. He could remember such an outrageous thing for at least a whole month. And they will use him as a bargaining chip, frequently boasting or mocking him with others. Not to mention that the foot traffic at the Pelican Bar is not too high, with less than 30 guests per night. So, this bartender definitely has a problem. He deliberately pretended not to recognize Evans's behavior, which actually proved his inner timidity. Because Evans came wearing a cloak with the intention of not wanting others to recognize his identity. So he followed Edward's intention and tried to help him hide his identity together. This is to lower his vigilance and temporarily stabilize him. At the same time, it is also hoped that Evans can take on this identity. If Evans really wants to conceal his identity, he pretends to be an old man by following the bartender's instructions. So he can't have a clear conversation with the bartender, and there won't be any communication between them for the time being. So, we can procrastinate. Mr. Admar, isn't it? As a result, Evans, wearing a hood, suddenly spoke up and said, "Are you waiting for someone?" This is the bartender's name he heard from other guests when he last came. What? Upon hearing these words, Haina turned around with some confusion and said, "Do you know him?" But she glanced at it, but couldn't see any special reaction from Evans. But when she turned around, she saw obvious astonishment and hesitation from the bartender. At that moment, her heart moved. "I vaguely feel that I have grasped something." Before she asked, Evans chuckled lightly. "It seems like something has been determined." Haina. Evans's voice was extremely soft, like his own superior and also like a teacher. Not only did he not politely refer to himself as his senior sister like before, but he also called him by his first name as if he were a superior. But perhaps it was precisely because of this, Haina, who was accustomed to obeying orders, suddenly became mentally alert. Yes. She instinctively focused her attention and took a half-step diagonally from behind Evans, vaguely protecting him behind her, concentrating on waiting for the next command. "Draw the sword," Evans ordered. Although she still didn't understand what had happened, Haina didn't hesitate to choose to follow Edward's instructions. In an instant, he pulled out the elf sword from its sheath. The blade slid out of its sheath like a living creature, and a pure white radiance shone from the blade. A dazzling white light illuminated the already bright ambient light of the bar at noon. In Haina's originally lake blue eyes, a silver-white halo gradually lit up. That resonates with the path of authoritarianism. The power injected into the bloodstream is gradually being activated, and the full power is pouring into all 4 limbs and bones. The waves roared and spread towards the surroundings around her, and the wine bottles on the wine cabinet swayed, making a chaotic and crisp tapping sound like wind chimes. The small number of guests were suddenly startled, leaving their positions one after another and running towards the door. Upon seeing this, the bartender's face changed and his heart was startled. "Am I exposed?" "Why?" He was shocked in his heart, but he didn't know why. The situation was critical, and he chose not to sit idly by. He took a deep breath and something bulged under his skin as if a worm was swimming. The purple pattern starts from the lower eyelid and spreads towards the entire face. Like veins that suddenly change color, it covers most of the face with a mesh pattern. Only the area around the mouth and chin, the part of the skin that should have grown a beard, is not covered by purple stripes. With his deep inhalation, the purple lines on his face became bright. Every time you inhale, it becomes bright, while when you exhale, it gradually darkens. These patterns spread rapidly on the skin like curses, spreading out from the cuffs and climbing all the way to the fingertips of 10 fingers. Demonologists. Haina recognized his identity. Or roughly, I recognized it. Supernatural beings can use mysterious techniques and various casting materials to unleash their extraordinary power in non-combat situations. But if you want to truly mobilize the power of the path to unleash those powerful extraordinary skills out of thin air, you must resonate with the path. Everyone has different resonance characteristics, but the commonality is that there will always be light effects corresponding to the color of the path. Just as white is the color of authority, purple is the color of transcendence. The former symbolizes diamonds, while the latter is amethyst. Although she did not know the specific profession of this wild elf, it ultimately belonged to the path of transcendence. The path of transcendence is illegal. Then treat the other party as a demonic scholar. Mr. Edwards really found it. She felt a sense of joy in her heart. Although I don't know how Edwards identified the other person's identity. Because she didn't see any loopholes in the other person's identity at all. But once she enters combat mode, this is her professional field. Looking at the wild elf bartender with purple spider web patterns under his skin. Seeing such obvious features, Edwards finally remembered his identity. The old man of evil Hub Pelican Bar, bad bartender, Otimal. In my impression, the strong man with arms as thick as a war hammer, hunched and shirtless, and his upper body covered in deep purple glowing patterns, his image gradually overlapped with the inflated wild elf. Originally, Evans just wanted Haina to scare him and give him some pressure. Unexpectedly, he couldn't bear the pressure and just lightly pressed it before transforming directly. Now we can directly find the right person. End of this chapter.